That money is if it needs to be replaced or repaired. They put the money into the budget in case that has to happen, but the building's operating right now with a functioning roof, so does it really need that? So there's still about $6 million that may never get spent. It could be a $7 million complete purchase and move in maybe $8 million, but it still comes out a lot less than the original plan.
Can I just say one other thing? And I wanted to reemphasize something that was said before about long-term vision and long-term future. And so what this board and this district has been doing very hard for over a year now is looking at every option and every opportunity. And I know that they've looked at property after property, and they've thought very long, and we've thought very long and hard about this. We are now in the process, halfway through, or wherever we're at in this process. With your help, we know we're asking sacrifice, but we're also trying to think 50 years in the future for this community. And it's not just the overcrowding of our schools, and every school is at or above capacity right now. So it's not a question of what will happen in the future. It's a question of what happens now. But it's not just our students who are expanding. It's our community. Our population has increased by 11% over the past 8 years. We know that. Walk down the street, go by the high school tomorrow morning when there's drop-off. We know that. We need to plan rationally and well, and we need your input, and we value your input. But you need to think into the future, and so what our goal is now is to present the best data possible with the plan that we feel is the right plan, and then it's up to you to decide at the polls. That's all we're asking.
Thanks, Greg.
Provide more information, more transparently, more readily. That's been a common theme throughout.
Thank you.
Show us the brilliance and the thought and the diligence you put into it.
Okay. Mary Clerman next. If she's not here, then
She yielded. But I would just like to add that what you're saying is, yes, you work very hard. You work very hard, but you worked in isolation. And all we're saying is that if every time you had a question, you would actually, and every time you got a question from somebody else here, or every time you got stuck, if you asked people in the community who are the ones who are objecting to it, you might get a solution. That's all. Thank you.
okay, thank you. Next, John Heilner.
Hillner.
Hillner, sorry. And after that is Martha, I think it's Martha Grudman, if I'm reading that right.
Yeah, you had it right the first time.
Oh, sorry.
Heilner. Okay,
Apologize.
we love our public schools. My wife and I attended public schools. Our kids did.
Oh, your address, please.
Oh, sorry, House Circle. Our kids attended public schools. Our grandchildren are attending public schools. We think Steve is doing a good job. Here's where we're coming down. We moved here as empty nesters 20 years ago, and we've never complained about paying for our schools, including the last very large bond issue. We are now downsizing because of the huge increase in property taxes over those 20 years. The school portion has grown exponentially faster than the municipal portion. We are lucky that we will be able to stay in Princeton so far. Like other seniors, we believe that we have contributed to the community and we like to stay here. I think Christina, who gave a presentation earlier tonight, is a great demonstration that it's the people who make the schools, not the mason and buildings. That's what we should focus on. I'm very unhappy, in fact outraged, that this board has not been at all transparent about the increased operating costs that will accompany these facilities. Additional staffing, administrative, custodial, perhaps some teachers, increased utility and insurance costs due to the 5-6 school and the Thanet property, more outsourced maintenance. A new 5-6 school may or may not make sense. As a former airline executive, I can tell you that there are real and significant added busing costs every time you add a destination. You know, we talked about pilot hours back in the day, but here we've got driver time, fuel, insurance, additional buses, assuming that you want a reasonable bus schedule. So what we're asking is that this board find a way to address only what is truly necessary in any components of a plan, not what would be nice to have. We ask that you come back with a smaller and better plan to be voted on in November 2019, and not to saddle us with paying for yet another extra ballot sometime before that, when fewer voters would come out to vote, especially given the enormity of this decision. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
John, if I can just share two things. One, we will have those operating costs for you out this week. And one piece of good news, the busing actually is going to be a reduction of about $250,000 based on our calculations, because right now we have all of our secondary students are mostly taken to schools through contracted busing, and our elementary school students are taken by our own drivers. If we're moving the 6th grade from the middle school to the 5-6 school, and we make that part of the elementary run, we can use our own drivers, as opposed to, and we eliminate contracted routes for a savings of between $200,000 and $250,000. But we'll get those costs out to you this week.
I spent 2 years in the scheduling department of my airline. I'd love to review those in detail. Thank you.
Okay.
Martha Friedman, 96 Jefferson Road. Many residents have asked for the Board of Ed to provide specific information on how it intends to pay for the resultant increases in operations and maintenance costs while honoring the 2% cap. What we want to know is the impact on individual tax bills as a consequence of approval of the $130 million referendum, not the additional incremental increase above what is already being paid from the previous bonds. Those previous bonds, which would be paid in full by 2023, have nothing to do with the incurring new debt service costs for new bonds. If the $130 million plus interest is paid back at 4% interest for 20 years, with the state of New Jersey paying 12.5% of the debt interest, as the Board of Ed has assumed, this referendum will add approximately $117 for every $100,000 of the house's tax assessment to your tax bill every year for the next 20 years. That means if your house is assessed at $837,000, the average value in Princeton home, you'll pay approximately $979 toward this bond every year for 20 years. That's a lot of money. If for some reason the Board of Ed is able to structure the bonds to be paid back over 30 years rather than 20, that may reduce the approximately $117 per year per $100,000 of assessed value to approximately $92 per year of $100,000 of assessed value. Approximately $770 added to your tax bill for the next 30 years. But just like on our home mortgages, if you take longer to pay back the loan, your payments may be a bit lower, but over time, you'll pay much more. The difference between 20-year bonds and 30-year bonds means more than $30 million additional interest. These amounts are only to pay back $130 million plus interest. These amounts do not include the additional operating costs of staffing, utilities, energy, insurance, maintenance, busing, that will be a direct consequence of the proposed facilities, nor does this include the more than 3% per year increase in the school budget that has taken place for the last 5 years. There's no reason to believe that these operating costs will diminish. To the contrary, it is far more likely these costs will continue to increase. I'm not opposing investing in our schools, but I can't support the referendum as it now stands because of these unanswered questions. I believe that smart planning creates great schools and urge the Board of Ed to vote against advancing this to the voters this fall to allow time for more diligence. Thank you so much. And thank you for your hard work, but we do need more transparency.
I appreciate the question. I appreciate the concern that people have about the finances and the cost of this referendum. We do look forward to having our bond advisors meet with the community and talk through the very complex formula that's used. And I really want to caution those who are here tonight or listening at home to avoid thinking about the public school financing and the $130 million as a mortgage. Like, you can't plug in $130 million into a mortgage calculator, press 4% and get the output. It doesn't work that way. We're looking at a combination of 30 and 20-year mortgages. We are looking at what we call, we're looking at three different tranches. So taking the money over multiple years, 3 separate times. So we're not taking it all at once and then incurring that interest rate. We're spreading it out over time. And then we don't use the money all at once because construction takes multiple years. And so we invest the money and then we use the interest to offset the debt service. We're looking at a wide variety of variables that we're not paying the same amount every single year, just the way that school finance works. Unlike a mortgage where it's the same amount every month that we all pay, it doesn't work the same way for school finance. And so I know that there is this desire to get the number. We have put that out there. We'll put it out again, and we will make sure that our bond advisors can meet with people to really talk through all the variables that go into determining the cost per year for the taxpayers, but it is not going to be anywhere near the amount that you shared. I really do believe that we're looking in the range of Scott, you have the numbers there for an average assessed home. I know for the 100,000, it's about $34.50 in year one. It's about $44 in year two for the 100,000, and it's about $89-something, $90 in year three. I'm not sure what it is for an average assessed home, what the calculation is.
So your numbers are correct. And what we're referring to is slides that I'm sure we can make available. These were actually shown in a public session that was held at the Princeton Public Library back a few weeks ago. So per 100,000, as the superintendent indicated, the first year was $34.56 estimated. Second year, $44.47. Now these are not additive. Year one, year two. Year two, therefore, is approximately $10 on top of year one, if you want to look at it that way. The third year was $89.53. And then the numbers decline because at the end of that 3 years, debt that the district has that is part of refinancing is rolling off as well. And then the decline continues over the life of the bonds. For that $129 million total, the estimated average additional impact over that full time frame of the 30-year bonds was $8.50 per year.
Is year four $28?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
Yes.
Is it possible to ask Mr. Downey a question about what he just said?
Well, you're going to have time to speak, and so he's answering a specific question of a prior speaker, and we don't get a three-way cross-exam, I'm sorry. Okay. Okay, next, Yana Moore. Sorry, next, Yana Moore, and on deck is Max Salk.
We're gonna ask you to pronounce your name, because I don't think we got that right earlier.
Yeah, that's too bad. I was the mayor of this town. You should have it by now. Good evening. My name is Yana Moore, born and raised in Princeton, educated in the Princeton Regional School System, graduate of PHS and Princeton University, the last mayor of Princeton Borough, and in this context, the daughter of a 2-term board president who oversaw the merging of the 2 districts and built John Witherspoon School. And I'm the widow of a 2-term board president who landed on the board after the last referendum was passed and had to fight to make our community whole from financial matters arising out of that process. One that can get out of hand, out of control, of a Board of Education very easily without sufficient knowledge base and due diligence. My father graduated from Princeton High, my aunt, salutatorian, in the 30s, 2 cousins in the 60s, my daughter in 2008, my twin nephews, 2015, and my step-grandson in 2015. All college graduates, 4 masters, 1 PhD, and 3 soon-to-be graduates. And I submit that I am uniquely experienced. I am rooted in the values of education. However, I live in a neighborhood unable to afford the rising taxes it has faced since 2010 revaluation, and just this February saw an average increase of assessed values of 18%, 15% higher than most of the community. I'm also very steeped in the benefits but the burdens of education and justly concerned about how this process has yet to receive sufficient airing, accurate analysis, and clear evidence-based decision-making. One area of specificity that I'll just speak to relates to the statements of overcrowding at PHS that later morphed into discussion about capacity, which is sort of future banking of space. And I asked during the town hall 5 months ago at JW for the factors and the formulae that establish a determination of existing overcrowding or need at PHS. Certainly hall congestion during changing of classes is no measurement. So I asked about class size, per student square footage, special use needs, and other factors as metrics, and I was told the information would be posted. 5 months and it has not. When I graduated from PHS in 1973, there were close to 500 students in my class, and while we still had SRAs from West Windsor, Plainsboro, and Cranberry, school population was almost 2,000. The short time frames in this analysis in terms of the student population and facility improvements for this referendum don't really reveal this, nor do they sufficiently justify the physical plant growth, a building that is almost twice the size of our facility in the 70s with a higher population. Princeton has proudly performed exemplary without the accoutrements of many school systems because it was not newness or lavishness of an edifice that was important. It was teaching and concern for student achievement that mattered most and that we invested in. And I'm concerned when I hear Princeton should have the biggest and the best facilities, as those are not the values the system was built on. Just look to Trenton High School, where they had a beautiful edifice, a Broadway quality theater in their auditorium with real proscenium arch, a curved slope floor, beautiful seats, and they had an indoor pool with the details of a Roman spa, columns and mosaic tiles. Over the years, they couldn't afford the upkeep. The deferred maintenance resulted in fragile infrastructure, and the building became derelict. All that lavishness could not support the true needs of the students. Curriculum redefinition is not new. When JW was built, as an elementary school, it was during a time when communal learning was being advocated. Those efforts soon went by the wayside, having had no measurable positive effects, especially on those students who needed more, not a system of diluted and dispersed resources.
Ms. Moore, you're over 2
Further
minutes. If you
discussion
could wrap
about
up.
capacity has been analyzed using a rate of usage of 75%, and that usage rate we cannot afford and leads to bloated square footage. It is unusually low rate for schools in the Northeast, is highly dependent on student population, number of classes offered, and class sizes. And that so-called average rate doesn't necessarily correlate to Princeton. I'm still waiting for the answers to questions that I posed 5 months ago that are germane to establishing need. And as I said then, I want to ensure that we are not McMansioning our schools with values that bigger and glitzier is better. I want you to prove to the citizens of this town that based on reasonable factors and metrics within our values and means, the next referendum is not just a frivolous expansion. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Next up is Max Salk, and then following that is Hunt Stockwell.
Max Sula, 28 Whitmer Court. Thank you. I'd like to thank the board for all your hard work. I'm sure you have greatest intentions when you come up with ideas. However, I don't want to repeat everything that was said before. And I'm here last minute. I found out about this meeting just yesterday evening and changed my plans. And 3 of my kids who are starting tomorrow know that I'm here, and they're like, "Dad, be careful what you say." I'm not going to be careful, but I'm not going to repeat a lot of people. I'm actually the result of this country being a land of opportunity, and I achieved everything as a result of this country giving everything to people that want to achieve. And I moved to Princeton a few years ago, built a home here for my family, coming from another great neighborhood in Bergen County with the great school systems, but I knew I was coming to a neighborhood of diversity, of people of different interests, and some place where I can call it home and bring my kids the best they can get. However, some of the things that come to mind tonight, and it was repeated, it's sharing with us your plans. I'd like to make an example, and Princeton Public Schools sent us email a few days ago very lengthy, about qualification of teachers, policies on civility, harassment, intimidation, and bullying, integrated pest management, and save the dates. You had time to do all that. However, somehow there was no time available to send us detailed information about referendum. Maybe I missed that email, but as far as I know, I don't think it's insulting anybody's intelligence by providing us with complex math, as it was mentioned earlier by one of the members here. I think it's important for people to read it. If they don't understand the math, maybe to clarify it. And you mentioned Phoenix coming to the meeting. It would be great to listen. And I want to mention that, and I know my time is almost up, when I built my practices and my practices grew and I got into real estate to accommodate my offices, I realized the real estate is not as simple as it once seemed. And some of the purchases you made and comments made, maybe it's 6 million, maybe it's 7, maybe it's 8, that's vague. You need to have solid numbers in real estate. Otherwise, those old buildings will crumble and the roofs will collapse and you will not know what you're really investing. And the last thing, some of the real estate agents and builders are really having good time across the highway in Cranberry. One of my employees just the other day bragged at my office that she's leaving Freehold Township for Cranberry because she's going to pay so much less than those fools in Princeton and enjoy the school system. So my question is, with this referendum heading, are we benefiting solely our students, or are we helping Cranberry real estate agents to really profit really well because they're building a lot of units there now based on that information? Thank you for your time and your hard work, and I look forward to meeting with Phoenix representatives.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sure, Greg, any?
Sure, just very, very briefly, and thank you for the comments. I just want to point out one thing, though, that Cranberry students are our students. For 30 years now, we have been a community. We're not like Princeton Township, former Princeton Borough, or what's together. For 30 years, we've pledged as a board to protect every child that comes to us, whether it's from the charter school, whether it's from Cranberry, whether it's from other sources, and we've taken a vow. And it's fine to discuss policy matters, but I want to make sure that everyone knows that how we feel about every one of our children. And we heard today about knowing every child, caring for every child, and I think that's really important for every child that we have in our school system.
Thanks, Greg. Mr. Stockwell, if you could just say where you are, and on deck is Kip Cherry.
Hi there, Hunt Stockwell from 48 Glen Drive over in Mountain Avenue and the Great Road. We're in school, so I'd like to give you guys some grades. I think you get an A for education in the past and currently. And I was very impressed with everything I heard today. Thank you for your wonderful, wonderful work. I'm not sure you get an A for affordable education, at least going forward. And clearly you've heard that tonight, that we are at a major turning point in this town in terms of affordability for everybody. And you have to really refine your pencil and think outside the box. You had a suggestion about some kind of a break for seniors. That's a possibility. I have a strong recommendation for you, is that you get an independent financial advisory board like the town has. And the town has done a very good job in communicating what it's doing and in saving us money. And that financial advisory board has had a lot to do with it. I'll give you another grade on credibility. That's maybe a D. Okay. Oh, maybe you're D minus. What do you think, guys? D minus? Why do you think so many people are here? It's because they don't believe what you're telling them, and they've asked you questions and you haven't answered it. It has not been a fully transparent process. I know you tried, but it hasn't worked. This is a big change. Thank you.
Thank you. And after Kip is Toby. Toby, I'm sorry, can't read your last name. It could be, anyway. Go ahead, Kip.
Kip Cherry, 24 Dempsey Avenue. So far, the focus has been on the increase in levy to cover the amount of the bonds. I want to talk about the huge increase in operating expenses. I would like members of the school board and the public to imagine one levy for operating expenses as coming from their left pocket, this right here, and plus another one coming from the right pocket. The right pocket has been the bonds. We have to repay the bonds, but we're forgetting all the operating expenses. We have to pay for the permanent increase in operating expenses from buying the old Thanet office buildings and from constructing the new 5-6 school, which comes both from their left pocket. The annual increase in levy to cover operating expenses from our left pocket is capped at 2%. But there are exceptions to this cap, and we have been taking advantage of these exceptions. According to the user-friendly budget, which is in my hand right here on page 2, the most recent levy for operating costs was $76 million. This was 4.2% higher than the previous year, presumably because of these exceptions, which include some new enrollment, medical costs, and maybe some things I don't even know about. The previous year, the increase was 3.9%. It's pretty clear that in recent years, our school district has been needing to max its levy. We have had high school taxes, and this is the reason, even before taking on the new operating expenses of the 5-6 school and the old Thanet office buildings. These increases build quickly because they are exponential. Each increase builds on the one previous to it. In just 2 years, the levy has increased by 8.7%, compounded, according to the user-friendly budget. An average Princeton $837,000 house in 2017 paid $11,000 to the district. In 2018, it paid $11,400. This year, with a 4.2% increase, the amount is now $11,900. If next year the increase is 4%, the taxpayer will be paying $12,385 to the district. This is just for the operating side. Obviously, we can expect these increases to continue. Some taxpayers maybe were lucky and didn't experience a big increase in their taxes because their assessment didn't increase in 2017 or 18. However, others received increases of over 15% in their assessment. Steve has stated that new professional 5-6 school salaries will total about $1.5 million for salaried employees with a new principal and new teachers. So far, we still don't know the other additional costs: maintenance, cafeteria, and other support staff, maintenance and school supplies, systems maintenance, electricity and gas, water, cafeteria, food, snow removal, minor repairs, minor improvements, and busing, all related to the 5-6 school. So with the current levy of $76 million, 2% of that is $1.5 million, which is just enough to cover these new salaried employees, but there's nothing left for all of these other costs. And that assumes we don't even need the $1.5 million to take care of the normal expansion of our budget. Remember, we've been maxing our operating levy, supposedly capped at 2%, and have been squeezing out and spending every penny beyond that cap. So it's not clear that we can spare $1.5 million to pay for the salaries of the 5-6 school. And unless the district has been buying gold bars that they can cash in, the numbers suggest strongly that we'll be running a major deficit as soon as we own Thanet and the 5-6 school opens. So we have a big problem coming out of our left pocket, so far as I can see, a big problem. We need a restart. We need a better plan for our schools, one that the faculty, students, and the public have been heavily engaged in developing, one that makes teaching sense, one that makes financial sense, one that is transparent, one that better meets the needs and desires of the kids, and one that maintains the diversity of our town. Thank you.
Okay, and next is Toby, I think it's Israel, and this makes us now officially half done with public comments. So,
okay. Toby Israel, Walnut Lane in Princeton. I try my very best to support the schools, and I really appreciate the passion and hard work that you and the board have put into thinking about the referendum. But I've also listened to everything that's been said opposing it. And what I hear overall is really that the citizens here have reached a tipping point when it comes to further taxing Princeton residents, no matter how good the cause may be. And I just wanted to add a little overview history that people have referred to. I know that most of you probably know that in recent memory we paid for an upgrade and expansion of our school facilities that resulted in what many of us see as a really botched job. So, you know, there's kind of like sore feelings about that. Nobody's rushing to approve yet more work being done. But as many of you may not know, the Princeton revaluation conducted in 2010 resulted in a lawsuit against the town, which is still ongoing, because the revaluation formula, in effect, stole from the poor to give to the rich. The taxes in the western section, on average, were decreased, and the taxes in the low and moderate income neighborhoods were increased, largely because of the tear-down McMansion greed at the root of this problem. And there was such an outcry in Princeton that the township and what was then the borough commissioned a report, which I have in my hand. And one of the things they suggested and actually went through on was they recommended that rather than valuing our homes every 10 to 15 years, they should revalue them every year. But there was a warning in the report that said low and moderate taxpayers, however, might find their tax burdens more debilitating in the relative increases in value would trigger an immediate increases in tax bills. And that's exactly what happened. So we're already just overburdened by this history that exists now. So when we think about now funding the school system, it's not that we're not sympathetic. It's just that given a choice, right now we feel like, well, we kind of need the pizza with the cheese and tomato rather than the pizza with all the works, because what we see happening is that our neighbors are selling up and moving out. That is our low and moderate and diverse and people who make this town, like the artists that came up first, make this town such an interesting place. And as you said at the beginning, school is not really the space, it's the kids. And do we want, yes, beautiful schools, but with kids who represent an overprivileged population? I don't think we do. So my recommendation is that, yes, we really have to think out of the box. I appreciate that you have to think through to the future, but there's some things that are just happening in other parts of our town and in our county and in our state where we're working in isolation and not seeing that one increase here is now causing you a problem in another pocket. We all have to work together and come up with some kind of solution that's workable for all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next up is Susanna Monceau, and then followed by Stefan Otto.
Good evening. My name is Susanna Monceau. I live at 156 Moore Street. Back in April, my husband and I asked the board what should have been two very simple questions. One, to provide the total ongoing operating costs for the expanded facilities you're thinking about building. And two, the potential impact of those costs on our budget, the school budget, and on our taxes. We also asked that this information be published on the board's website. 6 months later, the board has yet to fully answer those questions. I think a lot of people have alluded to this. It's incomprehensible to think the board is poised to vote to spend $130 million without a complete picture of what this increased ongoing operating costs will be or how we will pay for them. I think it's been mentioned over and over again that we are very, very stretched in Princeton, that many of us cannot afford the taxes as they are, and clearly you're spending a lot of extra money, but we really don't know. This is a fundamental question that any for-profit, non-profit answers before making a capital investment of this nature. To make a decision without this information is fiscally irresponsible. So though the board has yet to answer our questions, we know a few things. Steve claimed that the additional staffing expenses been mentioned today for the 5-6 school alone will be at least 1.5 million. When combined with some rough costs for HVAC and various other ongoing costs, it's likely to be just under 2 million a year. This excludes, we've already heard this, busing students, although I did hear that that's going to go down, so great. But it still excludes ongoing maintenance and insurance for any of the expanded facility, including the 40-year-old Thanet Circle buildings. They're going to need ongoing maintenance. The cost of replacing the AstroTurf field that you're putting in, those turf fields have to be replaced every 8 to 10 years. You're doing the one at the high school right now. Even without these additional undisclosed costs, the increase we're talking about, the $2 million or so, that consumes the whole of the 2% cap just on its own. Yet this also doesn't give us a complete picture. We know that in recent years, the board has sought and received waivers to exceed that 2% cap. That's also been mentioned tonight. Increases in base budgets over the last 5 years have been about 3.2% a year. There's simply no other way to say this. The board has not provided full details, but it's still clear that these ongoing costs are just going to blow a huge hole in your budget. And we already can't afford. A lot of people have mentioned this. So I want to ask you for the following. I want a complete and full assessment of the total operating costs, transportation, insurance, ongoing maintenance, staffing, and I really want you to put this on your website. Whenever I talk to people about this referendum, they're always, we don't have enough information, we can't vote on it. Based on what we do know, we anticipate, figuring it out ourselves, back of the envelope stuff, that the ongoing operating budget is going to grow at least 5 to 6% a year after the referendum. We demand that you either confirm that we're right or you explain how we're wrong. But at the moment, you know, you just don't give us any figures. Clearly, it looks like to us that the 2% cap will be exceeded. We therefore ask that the board provide a detailed plan of how you're going to cover these costs. We've heard it mentioned that you're seeking other funding. What is it? Is it locked in? How much other funding? So when confronted with this budget gap, Steve Cochran said he was in discussions with the Murphy administration because, and I'm quoting here, the 2% cap doesn't work for schools like Princeton. So we demand that the superintendent and the board, all of you, should categorically confirm to us, should state that Princeton Public Schools is not seeking an exemption to raise our taxes at a rate higher than 2%. I think that would be essentially a deal breaker among the many other deal breakers in this referendum. But if you're thinking of increasing not only 130 million, but increasing our tax rate at above the 2% cap, we find it really shocking and deeply concerning. My husband can't be here tonight because he's traveling for work, but we find it really shocking that the board's even considering voting on this referendum, whether it's now, whether it's in December, etc., without publicly disclosing the ongoing budget, which, as I say, I brought a letter to this board that signed by 40 people not long ago that we've asked you for this, and we still don't see it on the website. And every week we've been told, oh, it's going to appear. So we urge you all to do your duty and to act as a deliberative body that was elected to serve this whole community rather than simply rubber stamp ideas and nice thoughts, and do not hold the referendum this fall, not in November, not in December, not until these things are clear. We want you to essentially do your homework, obtain the information, publish it publicly. I have one more thing to say. To ensure that we have great schools. We support the public schools. I should have started by saying I had 2 children go through the public school here. I'm very happy to support them. I've always voted for referendums. I'm not so happy about this one. I would also, and you're not going to let me finish on this, but I am going to at least...
Everyone has 2 minutes. It's not that I'm not letting you finish.
Okay, I have a petition, which I'm happy to give you, so I don't need to read it, but I have a petition that's been signed by 140 of our neighbours, many people who couldn't make it here tonight. Some of them, I think, are here. Where we urge you as the Board of Education to vote against placing the referendum on the ballot this November or December. I have copies of the petition and I have the 140 signatures, and I just checked my phone and I have 5 more which aren't on the list, but people are just sending me those signatures all the time. I think it's important for you to, I'm just going to pass this down.
Thank you.
And then I won't need to read it. But I do urge you to consider the voices of 140 people who signed this. I sent it out on Saturday night, and that's what's happened since then. Thanks very much.
Okay. Susanna, thank you. Thanks for coming up and speaking. I personally like the 2% cap and then having the ability to go out to the public for a referendum, so we have discussions like this. I wouldn't want the 2% cap to be gone.
Good.
It makes it hard to meet the budgetary requirements to keep it going, the school district going, but you know, I like the 2% cap, and I would hope that the governor doesn't change it and we keep going to referendums when we need to.
No, I'm very glad to hear that. I just think the numbers don't make sense, or at least you haven't provided us enough numbers to give us confidence that you can possibly keep within the 2% cap. Thanks.
Let me just be clear for the members of the public who are here. The board can really only go above the 2% cap for certain increases in healthcare costs and for enrollment, excessive long-term enrollment. So we have received enrollment waivers in the past, which is why we were able to go above the 2% to approximately 3% in the past.
You might mention the charter school expansion last year, which cost I believe 1.4 million. And that represented a significant portion of the tax increase that people experienced last year. We had no control over it. Nobody in this town got to vote on it. Nobody.
But to back what Bill is saying, there's no interest in going above the 2% cap. We'll use the waivers as they come to us. But when I talk to the governor about funding formula changes for school districts like Princeton, it's school districts that have a growing enrollment, 10% over the course of 5 years, and have a charter school where we're paying most of our 2% increase to the expansion that is in place. So it's not a formula that works. I'm happy to actually work with the charter school to see if we can get it changed, but I'm looking for more state aid for both institutions. I'm not looking for the governor to say you can go above the 2% cap. I'm looking for the state to step up and help us.
Okay, Mr. Otto, and then on deck is Rob Berlin.
Good, thanks. My name is Stefan Otto. I live at 277 Moore Street, which is the back of the high school turf field. So I'm here today as a longtime Princeton resident to urge the board members to vote against holding the referendum with the current scope. As a father of 2 Princeton high school graduates, I'm not opposed to spending money on our schools and have supported past proposals. However, given the numerous unanswered questions about the referendum, many of which you've heard tonight from the folks in the room, the questions on the referendum, the flawed and the misleading data about projected enrollment, and the lack of details about how the ongoing costs associated with the expanded facilities will be paid for, I will not support the board's plans as they now stand. I will be an advocate for pragmatic plans that address the critical infrastructure needs identified by students, parents, and teachers by the numerous meetings that I've attended in the past, specifically hearing from teachers. I've spent most of my career as a project manager. In that role, I've routinely helped project teams make hard decisions about whether to move forward with specific projects, weighing benefits against risks and evaluating a variety of data points. As a team, I would expect the board to employ a similar evidence-based decision-making process for the referendum. However, given the significant number of questions still unanswered, I don't have the confidence that the board has done so. This may be a bit of a repeat, but the proposed Thanet Circle real estate investment is a great example. There's still remaining significant unanswered questions about Thanet Circle, and my friends, neighbors, and I need answers from the board. We've heard more details previously. The board seeking $6 million to renovate the Thanet Circle building. Request that the board provide detailed list of what works are required on the Thanet Circle building. Ideally, the report would be compiled by a reputable surveyor familiar with commercial real estate. The board plans to use only about 20% of the space. We also need details on explanation. We heard some hint of what was going to be done, but some details would be very valuable. And then I understand that Steve Cochran has said that Thanet could be used to provide universal preschool. Great idea. If a universal preschool is under consideration, the board needs to produce a business plan to support this project, including an assessment of the current needs in the district, projected enrollment, and the like, as well as management expenses. Lastly, there's been some discussion of leasing out the Thanet Circle property to commercial entities, despite the fact that the property has sat vacant for more than a decade. Again, the board needs to produce the business plan about how it will rent out the facility and serve in a landlord capacity. For instance, has the board considered the property tax liability associated with this enterprise? And will this involve added administrators to provide real estate services or property management support? The acquisition of Thanet Circle raises significant questions that have yet to be addressed by the board. It is inconceivable to me that you would consider undertaking such a project without answers to these key questions. The fact that Thanet Circle represents just one of the many issues that the board has yet to resolve raises serious concerns about the decision-making employed by the board as part of this project. I ask that the board members serve in the role in which they were elected, that they ask tough questions, and that they make evidence-based decisions to do the homework that's required to make the smart decision. I feel that the Princeton schools are not so much about the buildings. They're really about the teachers and obviously the students. And if we're to be in the business of building great schools, we do need to be in the business of smart planning, not ill-informed decisions. I therefore urge the members of the board to vote against holding the referendum in its current state.
Thank you.
Thanks for letting me speak.
Sure. Next, Rob Berlin, and on deck is Eve Colson. If Mr. Berlin isn't here, if Eve Colson is available, then maybe we just start with you, ma'am. And after Eve Colson is Phyllis Marchand.
Easier to go out and come back in.
Right.
I'm Eve Colson. I live at 291 Russell Road, and I've been a Princeton resident since 1990. Both of my children attended Princeton Public Schools. I've been on the zoning board for 3 years, and before moving here, I served on the finance committee of the town of Arlington, Massachusetts. I've been a member and chair of an advisory board to my college in St. Louis for over 10 years. I mention these involvements because I have more of an understanding of the process that you as a board are facing than the very complex content of the referendum questions you are considering putting on the ballot. My message to you tonight is not about the details, but about credibility. Mine, hopefully established to some degree by my participation in civic life here and elsewhere. The credibility of those who are urging you to vote against asking Princeton residents to agree to fund a very ambitious set of projects this year. I know that I have been paying as close attention to these issues as I have because of Joel Schwartz and Corinne O'Hara's involvement. They are among the most reasonable, intelligent, and diligent people I know. I trust them. They do their homework. But it is your credibility as a board that is at the heart of my message tonight. And I say that out of empathy, not criticism. Simply put, the referendum questions, if approved by the voters, would leave you accountable for a tremendously complex and expensive set of projects. If anything goes wrong, given the unprecedented intensity of questions and concerns that have been raised by many of us, it would surely take a long time to undo the damage to the board's credibility. If there truly is urgency to proceeding as soon as possible, you haven't made the case yet, at least to me and a number of others. Why not take the time needed to make the best possible case for something that will have such long-lasting consequences, both in terms of public trust and the Princeton Public Schools? Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Phyllis Marchand, and then following her, Ronnie Reagan.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so then Deborah Dorman.
Hi, I'm Deborah Dorman. I live at 307 Shady Brook Lane, Princeton, New Jersey, 08540. I've had 3 children go through Princeton Public Schools, 30 years worth, and I wrote all of you a couple of letters. I'm the one that traveled, my husband and I traveled all over the country to find the perfect place to move and raise our children. And we picked Princeton because of the diversity was one of our #1 issues. I think maybe you all have gotten that letter and maybe know who I am now. And that really brings me to what I want to say. It's ironic and frankly shocking that a major selling point of the Board of Education for the referendum has been its supposed benefit to disadvantaged members of our community. In reality, this project will result in a staggering financial burden on the members of our community least able to bear its costs. Even worse, this funding will underwrite a deeply flawed project with costly operating expenses in addition to the $130 million bond cost to be borne by the community in perpetuity. The marketing and the promotional approach by the Board of Education to the referendum has been relentless. A candid presentation of the true long-term cost is yet to occur. As someone who raised 3 children who attend in Princeton Public Schools, and I was very, very involved every step of the way, I'm acutely aware of the need for a facilities referendum. I have voted for the referendums every time. When I see the signs about people caring for children, I care about all the children as well. In fact, I care about all the children so much that I want every child to have the same success rate or the closest achievement rate as possible. And I know from my 30 years being in Princeton Public Schools, there was a tremendous gap in that. I don't know what the numbers are now, but I have a feeling it's not far behind. As someone who raised children, I'm acutely aware of the need for the referendum. I'm eager to contribute my share, as many of us are. But not have misgivings about the current proposed plans. What I oppose is spending money that cannot, because of poor planning and inadequate execution, produce the intended result. And also, the sale of the referendum, which began in January of 2018, it's basically that if you don't agree with it, that we're against our town, against our schools, and against our kids. This is a false narrative, just as the false dichotomy to say that if the only choice is to approve the referendum as proposed, or else we'll have overcrowded, rundown schools. There has to be the community coming together versus being so divisive so that we can figure this out together, because it's not one or the other. It's a combination, and there's somewhere a meeting in the road somewhere in the middle. And it's not that we don't want the best for our kids, but what we truly believe, or what I truly believe, is what has been proposed is not good enough. It's not good enough for our kids, it's not good enough for our schools, and it's not good enough for our entire community. Many people, after careful study, have come to believe the referendum as proposed is poorly thought out, has not been clearly presented to the community, and is unlikely to achieve the very goals in which it aspires. In addition, many people who are willing to dig deep and pay an additional tax burden are deeply concerned that the weight of that enormous tax burden falls fairly and disproportionately on the members of our diverse community who are least able to sustain these additional costs. It would break my heart to see the journey that we made to bring our family here and live here for the last 23 years, because of the brilliant diversity and the support for it, continues to disappear as it's been. And I just don't envy you at all. You have a lot of roadblocks ahead, but I know that there's brilliant people in this community, people with heart, people that care, and I do believe that if we don't all become the metaphor of coming together and make something work, then we're no better than what else is going on in the world today. Thank you very, very much.
Next is Joel Schwartz, followed by Ruth Schulman.
Betsy, before you start the timer, I have a point of order that I offer on behalf of all of you, everyone here, and everyone listening. And it's about the way these meetings are conducted. And I'll give you an example. A while ago, Michel DeBiche made some comments to you about Thanet. And after his remarks, 5 of you responded. Essentially to sort of refute what he was saying, right? And that was half a dialogue. What he was saying to you was you didn't provide information in writing. Instead, what you guys did is speak at him verbally and do exactly what he didn't ask you to do, and what so many people tonight have been asking you to do, to put things in writing. I found that ironic because there is a bit of a confusion sometimes in these meetings. I know that officially you guys don't engage with speakers, but sometimes it seems appropriate, and I personally am grateful that you do. I'd urge you to think about the structure of your meetings. At planning boards and zoning boards and town council meetings, there is engagement between the principals sitting at the dais, the expert witnesses, all the people get a chance to have a dialogue. And here, we seem to only have a dialogue, no offense, I don't mean it in a snarky sense, but only when you guys feel like it. If somebody says something that you disagree with, you take exception to, you say, okay, I'd like to comment on what you just said. You're entitled to do that, but if you do that, then shouldn't that person have a chance to come back at you and say, right? So I ask you to please consider how you structure your meetings. There's two other ironies in the example that I'm using to illustrate the dynamic of your meetings. One is that every single comment that was made in response to what Mr. DeBeach said is not in any document. And he was asking you for documents. It so happens I'm very conversant with that because I have made an Oprah request for any and all documents related to THANET, including a feasibility study. Everything that you guys said is not in writing. I have every document that you have on THANET, unless for some reason you're withholding documents. Everything you have, I have. Nothing of what you said is in writing. Everything that Mr. DeBeach was saying is all about, if you want us to take THANET seriously, and the other people who've spoken on THANET, give us the facts. This is not my talk. This is a point of order.
No, there's not points of order, Joel. There's a public comment period
I'm sorry,
that has 2 minutes for each person.
Then I asked you not to start the timer because
it doesn't matter what you ask. Everyone, you've got to be considerate of the people behind you and of this board who hasn't even started.
You have to be considerate.
Joel?
I'm sorry, Patrick, Mr. President. I'm sorry, but this is something that has gone on for a long time. I'm not going to talk about this subject any further. It's not what I came here to talk about. But this has happened in almost every conversation tonight.
In every conversation, Joel, we've had a problem with you never wanting to stop and give people time, give other people time.
Because you want to refute what people said. Here's what I wanted to say tonight.
Your time is up,
I'm sorry. I'm going to make my statement.
No.
Hey, this is my comment. My comment was about the way you conduct your business.
No.
Here are my comments.
I would like to make a motion to temporarily adjourn.
The dog.
I second that motion, Pat.
A motion and a second?
I'll make the motion then.
Second? I'll second. Okay, we're going to take a break.
Let him speak. Let him speak.
Thank you, Ralph. Actually, that guy's growing on me.
I like it. Okay, Joel, we're going to call the meeting back to order.
Thank you.
And continue our public comment session. The next speaker is Ruth Schulman.
Thank you. The dog ate my homework. That's what I thought when I read today's press release. Do you really believe that the reason the state did not approve the referendum is because of a backlog? If that's the narrative you'd like us to believe, I recommend you think a bit longer before you squander what remains of your credibility by, in effect, saying it's all the fault of NJDOE. The structure of this referendum has been built from the very beginning on a faulty, flawed foundation, and the spectacular collapse of the November 6th referendum vote is a direct result of that faulty foundation. Changing the date of the vote to December or June 2019 does nothing to fix the flaws in that foundation. The only way to fix those flaws is to fix those flaws. You've heard many residents tell you the referendum is flawed. Tonight, I'd like to read you something from your website, your words. It's with regard to the 5-6 school. Quote, "The district carefully studied a variety of approaches to add space to our schools and to make needed upgrades before settling on the proposed plan." End quote. I made an Oprah request for any and all studies with regard to the 5-6 school, and I was told that no such studies were done. No feasibility study, no reports, no nothing. So the language that's on your website, most people would take to mean that you did studies. I suggest you get your house in order in that regard. The website also has the following language. Quote, "The 30-year annual average for question 1 and 2 per 100,000 of assessed value is $8.50, end quote. You said that in response to the question you've been asked hundreds of times. What will this referendum cost me? Here's what the math that you used earlier and is on your website adds up to. The 1-year average at $8.50 times 8.37 to get to the average house, $71 per year. That's $2,000 in round numbers over 30 years. That's one average house's share of paying back $130 million. If there were 10,000 houses in Princeton, which there are not, that would generate only $21 million. $21 million by your numbers to pay back $130 million interest. I'm going to make the math really simple. Forget about bonds, forget about interest. Just the $130 million. If you wanted to pay back $130 million in 30 years, in 30 equal installments, it's $4,320,000. You take off 12.5%, and you're left with $3 million, round numbers, $3,800,000 per year. Equal payments for 30 years, just the principal. I just told you that your numbers generate $21 million. You want to pay back $3,800,000 every year, not even counting the interest. Think about that, right? And what does that come to for each house? The math is incredibly simple. To figure out what that burden is, you take that annual payment, $3.8 million, divide it by the entire assessed valuation of this town, which is just over $7 billion, and you find out that it's $50 per 100,000. The math is much easier than you think. It's not quite as simple as a mortgage, but if you work the math without even counting interest, none of your numbers work. Here's
All right,
what
Joel,
you're doing.
you've had your 2 minutes on top of your 2 minutes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Pat, can I say one quick thing?
Sure.
I just wanted to, number one, first of all, thank everyone for being here tonight. It's a long night. It's going to continue to be a long night. We really appreciate everyone's input. Number two, a number of the speakers have eloquently talked about evidence-based decision-making. And I applaud those, all of us, who are trying to follow that. But as part of that, I do want to emphasize that there's been a little bit of undercutting the data that we have presented, not just our own data, but data of our advisors and our experts. For example, the projected enrollment was done by a gentleman who's worked with 100 school districts across the state in 13 different counties. He is certified and works and is accepted by the New Jersey Department of Education. I don't think a gentleman like that, who's made presentations to the public on at least 2 different occasions and to the board, deserves to be said that that's flawed projected enrollments. We've worked through it together with you, and we want to do that with other things. But I do want to say, for example, as well with the finances, we brought in Phoenix advisors who have a very good reputation. We're going to bring them back in again when we know the numbers from the state. It has nothing to do with what reason or not. The state is working its way through a plan. We want them to be as thorough as possible. We argued that in the past. We will provide the final numbers once the state gives us the final numbers, and we'll open it up just as we have all the way through. So we agree with you. We need transparency. We want that transparency. We want to work with you. But I do want to stand up for the experts and the advisors who've been helping us along this long path, and will continue to do so.
Thank you.
I think there is also something to be said. I think there's also something to be said that brilliant people with heart and people that care are in Princeton, and I think those people are sitting around this table. And I think those people have been working very hard and very diligently with the information that we're given. Board members are charged to make decisions based on the information that they're given. We ask hard questions, and we work hard to get the information that we can. I would ask the public to understand that we don't yet have a past referendum. So would they really like us to employ Scott to do a lot of minutia work when we don't even have a past referendum? I chair facilities. We can get this information and we can get it into fine-grained. And there's more numbers that we can get, and I know that Daphne has chaired facilities beautifully, and I know that Stephanie has an exemplary reputation. Tonight I have heard so many times that we don't do our homework. I don't know of anyone around this table that doesn't do their homework. That's not really the way we roll, and you can sigh if you like, but we work hard. We don't get paid a lot. We work hard. So from a facility standpoint and a transparency standpoint, if we put anything out, we want to be absolutely right. But I would ask Scott later to clarify for me exactly how much granulation we should be at this point when, 1, we don't have a question, 2, we don't have a date. So really, how granular should we be? I'm feeling guilty at this point, given what the public is saying, but I'm also, from a facility standpoint of 10 years, I'm not really sure we should be further along. So really, later, when we're in facilities and when we're working, I would like to kind of commit myself to say, really, how granular should we be? I want to listen to the public, but I don't want to overcommit us, and I don't want to pay engineering and finance to do more than we should do when we don't have something prepared to go. The state has not given us what we need to move forward, so I'm really not sure in understanding, and I do understand the process, in understanding the process, really how granular we should be right now. So I don't want to be disrespectful to the public. I want to give them what they need, but I also want to use our tax dollars appropriately, because if we're not there yet, I don't want to go paying people to go doing things that we have no intentions of doing.
Thanks, Evelyn. So we have 5 speakers that are still waiting. So you've already spoken, and it's time for the other 5. Afterwards, I'd love you to speak, but now if Ruth Schulman is here still, and if she's not, then Mr. Naginski.
Come on up. You can say bingo. It's like the Price is Right. Who's next?
And on deck is Hendricks Davis.
Hi, Evgeny Neginsky. I live on Mason Drive in Riverside, and I'm very new to this process. I just had a couple of questions. I was hoping that you guys can answer them as I speak, if that's possible. So I guess my first question is on the question of state aid. If the district issues 20 or 30-year bonds, how long does the state guarantee that their aid will be available?
State approvals, once they're issued, will include a debt service aid amount, percentage. That gets paid over the life of the bonds.
No, I understand that point. My question is, in 3 or 5 years, can the state renege on their promise?
Well, I don't speak for the state, but they will give us an approval that states that debt service over the life of the bonds.
Okay. I guess my concern lies that I'm sure it's not news that state of New Jersey is not exactly a fortress balance sheet. So we should think about that. A fortress balance sheet. My next question is, I've heard or read that there was a plan or idea to essentially rent Thanet Circle, some of the empty space, to other tenants. Is that still the case?
Part of it is already being rented to tenants.
So that will be continued?
Correct.
Okay. So as a parent of one student, and it will be 2 next year, I actually have some serious concerns about that, and I would like to understand how you plan to prioritize repairs and maintenance that would need to be done for commercial tenants versus public schools. Who takes priority? Is it an elementary school, or is it a rent-paying tenant? So if that's question possible to answer after I'm done speaking, that would be great. And my last point is very simple. I've seen, again, I've spent very little time on it, but I've seen projections for 30 years to penny for the cost of the referendum, but it's been for the financing costs, completely excluding operating expenses, and for a reason that I have yet to comprehend, including the debt saving costs from something that's completely separate. So to say that, I think Evelyn said that we're trying to be as precise as possible. I think people here are not looking for 2 decimal point precision, but they would like to know, plus or minus $500,000, what will be an all-in cost? Because I think right now at least that's what I hear being asked over and over again. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hendricks Davis, John Street. I have been a resident of John Street for 35 years. Moved into a house that I was able to purchase through the Witherspoon Jackson Neighborhood Association, and have lived there and developed the property over those 35 years to the point that I am now a high-paying tax resident of Princeton, New Jersey. I've supported every initiative of Princeton Regional Schools, even though I have no children that I've ever sent through the public education system here. I'm a product of public education in Washington, D.C., where my former high school, Western High School, now the Duke Ellington School for the Performing Arts, was rebuilt to the tune of $181 million. There are many people in Washington that disagree with that price tag, but seeing the school and seeing the product, if you will, that it produces, I think that the money was well spent. I'm not exactly sure yet if I will vote to support, in support of this referendum, based on the conversation and the process that I've witnessed tonight. I think that the board does need to do a bit more well, perhaps quite a bit more to answer questions of the public that is part of this village called Princeton. And as you know, it takes a whole village to raise the children. And I appreciate your listening to the members of the community, and I appreciate the community as well listening to the board. But I think maybe now that the referendum won't be in November, and maybe you're pushing to try to get it in December, I think maybe this is an opportunity for you to put the brakes on a little bit and consider some of the comments that have been made, not only about the details of your planning, but also the process of your planning. I think that there have been some very important things said here tonight that the board needs to take to heart and to listen to, so that you don't build for the future nice shiny new buildings and at the same time fracture the community that those buildings are built in. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Louise McClure. And then on deck is our last speaker is Peter Madison.
Hi, I'm Louise McClure, 13 Green Street in the John Witherspoon neighborhood. I've lived there for 34 years and I've been in Princeton since '69. I'm a teacher. This is about a different subject. I had read that the proposed 5-6 school would be an open situation, an open school. No? Okay, then I don't have the comment. I was going to say that if it were, I'd like to speak for the, I don't know, 3rd to 50% of us that don't have good filters and cannot operate in a system like that. Thank you.
Peter Madison, 38-year resident of Snowden Lane, past planning board chairperson, and I have 45 years of commercial real estate experience building and managing commercial buildings, including office buildings. So I initially recommended to the facilities committee that you buy this property. I thought it was a great buy. 15 acres, 2 office buildings that you can rent out, and all for $6 million in Princeton. Then I did my homework. And what did I find out? Not such a great deal. First of all, the tax map. There's multiple easements all over that property. You have no other land that you can develop on that other than what's there, unless you put perhaps a lighted athletic field on. And I can tell you, if you do that, the Governor's Lane people will hire an attorney, they will sue the BOE, and they will sue the planning board. And they will do it relentlessly until you get to court down in Trenton. And that comes from my planning board experience. So, the price of the building, $6 million, and then we're not sure if you need another $6 million to fix it up. We do know that it is not a Class A building, that it needs quite a bit of work to make it marketable. And here's the real problem with the building, the market. It was built in the 80s, together with all that Forestville Village office buildings. They were filled. Everybody wanted to be near Princeton, but the market has changed. There's too much traffic on Route 1. All the new office buildings are being done on Route 295. That's where Church and Dwight moved to, leaving 3 Thanet Road buildings vacant. And BMS, Bristol Myers Squibb, left 3 buildings over in Forestville Center. They're down on 295 now. What does that tell you? It tells you there's no market for this building. And there are, within 1 mile of the 08540 zip code, there are 7 million square feet of vacant space. And you can check the LoopNet commercial real estate site to verify that. So, what you end up having here is a potential property that has buildings that are worthless. So what are you buying? You're buying 7 to 8 acres of property, and you're going to have to knock those buildings down. So you're now spending about $8 million for 8 acres of property. That's what you're getting. And is that really worth it? Because that land is assessed by the Princeton tax assessor at $2,787,000. Something wrong there. 8 million? 2.8? Don't know. You're paying way too much for this. It's going to be an albatross, and it's going to be on your conscience. You need to hire a real estate consultant. As some of you have alluded, Ms. Spann, that you work with the information you have. You don't have any professional information on the real estate viability of this property. And it's going to be, mark my words, I'll bet money on it that this is going to be a very bad decision of yours.
Thank you. Okay, so we are going to move on now to item H, which is board committee reports. And given the hour, we just ask that you keep them highlights. Well, Dr. Sharma, if you want, I mean, you know the clipboard routine, but if you want to take 2 minutes before we go on.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you for all your hard work, your dedication and commitment to excellence. While a lot of work has been done, but a lot to be done. What I saw today is what I'm going to be talking about. What we witnessed this past weekend was the hero, Senator McCain. And I'm going to take a page from him. The person who was a Republican went across the aisles to work with everybody. And that's what I will really like all of us to work together as a team. There are a lot of questions that we need to answer. And I did personally a lot of independent analysis. I'd love to share with you. And I don't want to go on the board that's saying the analysis that you have quoted in terms of yearly, unfortunately, please don't quote me, they are wrong. Secondly, what I like to really do is let's have committees which will include citizens, trustees, including Princeton Council. And I'll give you the reasons why Princeton Council. Senator Sweeney had authored and authorized a study which basically recommended that the Princeton Council should meet with the school boards twice a year and other municipalities twice a year. So let's all work together. Let's bring the experts, whether it's architects or finances. We have a lot of talent in our town. Let's work it up. And towards that goal, and I mean that, I'll put $10,000 to facilitate such a forum. So we have a number of working committees, which we do, like I think somebody said, finance committee, as the council does, and I'm on a number of committees for Complete Street Committee and others. So I think if we work together and set up this working meeting, right now is a perfect time. And I mean, whatever reasons the referendum vote has been postponed, let's take advantage of that. Let's work together, because education is the most important thing. But on the other hand, we cannot, based on, and I've been taking notes of everybody, there's like over 90% or almost 100% against it. And I know there are people sitting at home saying, oh, well, we are for schools, and I'm sure they're working hard, and I appreciate what you're trying to do, but let's work together. It's not something against, and yes, let's work as a team. And I will really, really please consider setting up the working meetings for finance, demographics, even the needs. I came to a different conclusion whether we need a 5-6 school or do we need a new high school, for example. Let's look at the demographics. Look at 20 years, 30 years from now. Let's look at a holistic perspective, what we need to do, really need to do. And I will share with all my findings with you. And I'm sure there are a lot of people here who will share with you. But let's, based on not emotions, let's not talk about yes, me only, or not you. Let's talk about evidence.
Thank you, Dr. Sharma.
So I would really like you to think about it.
Can I ask you one rhetorical question? So everyone's against it. So why would 10 people on the board from varying backgrounds feel like this is the right thing? From varying backgrounds with PhD, law, finance, real estate. I mean, all over the place with a lot of expertise. I don't want you to answer it, but just something to think about. Why would so many people on the board think this is right?
Yeah.
But that's rhetorical.
No, no, no.
Okay, we've
Thank
got a
you,
big
Bill.
meeting ahead of us
Yeah.
still, and it's 10:30, so thank you. And thank you. And Sam, I understand you have a school to attend tomorrow or something, so if you, yeah. So if you wanted to, if you wanted to use this moment to,
Did you come with anything prepared to share with us?
Use the mic, turn the mic on.
I'm Sam. I'm one of the student liaisons for this year with Alley Rounds. And I'm going to be a senior next year. I write for the newspaper tomorrow. Yeah, crazy. I write for the newspaper, I do band, and I'm very excited to join the board.
great, thanks, Sam. Okay,
Student voice is very important to us, Sam. We're really happy to have you here.
okay, with that, we'll turn it over to our facilities chair, Daphne Kendall.
Thanks, Pat. Scott Downey, our lead architect, is here tonight, and so I'd like to just walk through some things that came to our attention today. And Scott, if you could just briefly explain the submission process, what, if anything, has been improved of our submission so far, including security and HVAC upgrades, I'd appreciate it. Thank you.
Sure, sure. So the submission process to the Department of Ed included 9 separate applications, each school, and then there are several for the high school that are submitted. So each of those packages are under review. The initial submission happened in April. There were some changes. We made the changes to the application for the administrative addition at JW. We also made the changes to split the high school into 2 questions. And the review from the Department of Ed is not a qualitative review so much. They're not looking so much at what we are doing in terms of the type of space or the design. They're looking for certain conformance to the regulations, and they're looking for the alignment of projected enrollments, the long-range facilities plan, and the actual projects that we've made the submission on. So although they have not issued any approvals yet, they have informed us that after scrutinizing and asking questions, they have accepted the enrollment projections from the demographer. They also have indicated that the long-range plan is approvable, as they put it. And although we don't have that approval, it'll be issued with the projects. You know, those are 2 initial steps in that process. So we do have those. The review that's ongoing with the projects is detailed oriented. They're looking at each space. They're looking at the aspects of the regulations that they have authority over, which is, you know, certain ceiling heights, certain lighting levels, and they're making sure that the drawings reflect that, and the educational specifications in their detail about furniture and so forth reflect that, and the alignment of those various pieces is what's ongoing. So, you know, when the board made the decision to split the high school project, you know, you heard from me at that time that I felt there was plenty of time for them to do their review and issue their approvals prior to November. That was perhaps poor judgment on my part, but that was my assessment at the time. So that process, however, is still ongoing. So we are allowed, the board is allowed to go to referendum 5 times a year. So November with the general election, December, January, March, and September. So the next potential available date would be December. And we're working closely with the Department of Ed to try and, you know, keep that process moving and get to an approval as soon as we can.
Okay. But nothing so far has been approved. So you think they're going to approve it as one package?
Well, it will be separate approvals, but I suspect they will all be issued at the same time.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Thank
you.
Thanks.
I just want to say one thing. The next facilities meeting was scheduled for September 10th. School's closed that day. I apologize. Yeah, I didn't notice it either, and it's Rosh Hashanah. I should know better. So we'll reschedule that, and we'll put the date on the website.
Oh, we're going to reschedule that?
Yes.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Unless you guys want to commit.
No, I'm actually, no, that's fine. And now finance with Chair Bill Hare.
Betsy asked me to keep this concise. Being from South Carolina, I can't do that. I have about 3 pages I want to read here. really our finance committee, it's sort of apropos to we're talking about all these operating costs. We've been looking at cost savings, and our last couple meetings, we've been looking really a continued in-depth review of our prescription drug plan and our health insurance plan, looking for cost savings to the district, to the employees, and improvement in the services of the employees. We're looking to try to figure out how can we have some short-term savings and some long-term savings that will help the operating budget. We discussed a session that Steph and I attended with a telecom expert. They were having a session about cost savings in the telecom, and it got boring pretty quickly when Stephanie kept saying, we did that, we did that, we did that. So all the stuff that they were suggesting as great cost savings had already been done by the district. Finally, Stephanie reported a bond refinance plan. Stephanie, would you mind briefly describing that? That's a good cost savings.
Sure. So in 2001, we had a large referendum which we bonded for debt. And in 2009, partial pieces of that debt were recallable or refinanceable. So we refinanced what could be legally permitted to be refinanced at that time. We saved $2 million on lowering the cost to the taxpayers. Now the same bond package, the remaining debt that's outstanding, there's a portion of it that can be refunded or refinanced. And this is the first opportunity since the 2009 that anything was callable. So the portion of it that is going to be refinanced, and it will save an estimation of about $150,000 a year for the through 2023.
I don't have in front of me when our next session is. Lately, we've been holding them closed because we're dealing with some sensitive prescription drug information and health insurance information. So we regret that they're closed, but as soon as we can start having open sessions again, we will.
Okay, thanks, Bill. Next.
And great job, Stephanie. Thank you.
Yes.
Oh, yeah. Yes, that's why you get the 21-year awards, because you're saving us money whenever you can, so I appreciate that. And next is Personnel with Chair Debbie Braunfeld.
Great. So Personnel met on Monday, July 16th and Monday, August 20th. There was a district-wide district-wide searches were conducted in July for the Riverside Elementary School principal and the language arts supervisor, which is pre-K through 8. A district-wide search committee will meet on Wednesday, September 12th to fill the humanities supervisor position. The residency committee will continue meeting with parents in September with the goal of concluding the work by the end of October. Tonight, the board will be approving a sidebar agreement to the board PREA 2018-2020 contract agreement, which will reflect non-athletic EPES, which is extra pay for extra service stipends. After an 18-month review of all non-athletic EPES, the stipends will be based on a formula, which is based on student contact time, number of students served, time of activity, planning time, and number of adult supervisors. This is a big thank you to the EPES subcommittee for all the time and effort that went into this new agreement. The board will also be approving the hiring of 66 new staff members, 29 in PREA, 2 in PAA, 26 in PRE SSA, and 8 unaffiliated. Of the new hires, is similar to what Stephen mentioned, 38% of new hires, which is 25 people, are staff of color. The breakdown even further is 9 are in our PREA, 1 in our PAA, 11 in our PRESA, and 4 in unaffiliated. The committee reviewed the current mentoring requirements for teachers in their 1st to 7th year in the district. PPS has the only 7-year mentoring program in the nation. 75% of PREA staff participate in the mentoring program. The first year of the PRESA mentoring program was a huge success, and that will be continuing. Open enrollment period for the sick leave bank is the month of September. The committee members approved allowing employees to donate up to 2 days of sick leave, usually before you could only donate 1, to the bank during the 2018-2019 open enrollment time period. The next meeting will be Monday, September 24th in Valley Road at 8:45. Thank you.
Thanks, Debbie. And I can just say there's so much good news in there.
Thank you.
That, you know, you may or may, as a member of the public viewing this, you may or may not know, but I'll just point on point out one thing, that the memorandum agreement with the PREA was so beautifully done.
Oh, yeah,
And
yeah.
they worked so well together, worked well with the administration and the board. It was a real collaborative process, and there was a lot of, it shows the level of trust that we've built over the last few years, and, you know, I'm really proud of that, and I think the whole board is really proud of the relationship we have with our teachers and with all of our unions. But it was to see that, knowing what we've been through in the you know, distant past now, is just amazing, and so I appreciate all your work on that and everything you've done with all these contracts. It just shows you where things are going, which is in a very good place.
Mm-hmm. Thanks.
Next, policy of Chair Greg Stankiewicz.
We'll keep this very short, and we met on, on August 17th, and we had a very busy schedule, so I wanted to thank the policy committee for all its work. We have 18 policies that are up for second reading in the 1,000 policy section. We'll talk a little bit about that when we get to that for second reading. We also have one policy from the past that we're going to be up for second read, and we also have a resolution that we'll be talking about. But the main thing I just wanted to say before we get further is that what we're trying to do is migrate from one policy manual to our new policy manual, NJSBA, and we've talked about this before. We realize that right now we're in a transition period, so the policy committee has redoubled its efforts, along with the help of the business administrator and Patty Gaynor, to get through it as quickly as possible, and we're going to try to get these policies to the board as quickly as possible. And our spirit is we want to get this done as a package and get us to a point where we're under one policy manual. And so that's the spirit we're going to be presenting these policies to the full board and to the public. So our next meeting is going to be, I'm sorry, our next meeting is Friday, August 17th from 8:45 to 10:15. September, I'm sorry. It is September 14th. 8:45 to 10:15 is our workshop. 10:15 to 10:45 is open to the public. So thanks.
Thanks, Greg. And now student achievement with Chair Betsy Baglio.
Yes, student achievement met 3 times since we're reporting on July and August. First, July 12th, Thursday, July 12th, we met in closed session to discuss confidential matters, and then we heard from Supervisor of Guidance, Christina Donovan, to share her plans for an expanded parent series similar to what she presented to all of us this evening. We then met July 27th at 10:30. We discussed, among many things, the use of media and technology in the classroom. We discussed field trips in the district. One thing that's reflected on tonight's agenda is that we have developed a new list of field trips, not sort of used the list that had always been used, but developed a new list thanks to Annie and her office, and that is now going to be approved annually. It will be also updated annually, and then new day trips as they are brought to student achievement will be added to that. Overnight trips that involve students are always approved individually by the board. So we also talked about the new common field trips at the elementary level, which we had discussed last year and we're implementing as well this year. We are moving forward with a new website provider, and we discussed that. And we also reviewed a draft of the 2019-2020 school year calendar. So we're hoping to present you with a draft very soon with that. We then met Monday, August 20th at 1 p.m. We were hosted at JW. We called it our away game for the year. Oh, now I have to. Now my time is up. Yes, it is the night before school starts. Mr. Burr shared quite a bit at this meeting, some new field trips and a whole class Keystone event for 7th grade. He talked about 2 new EPs to go along with the Source EP. There's a SERVE, a new course for 7th graders on service learning, and a SPEAK, public speaking, that will be offered to 8th graders. Also some plans for the new community period that will be now 6 through 8 Wednesday afternoons starting at the end of the month. Our next student achievement meeting is Friday, September 21st at 11:30. The public is invited to attend. We will meet here.
Thanks, Betsy. And now we're going to come right back to you
Yep.
with the Equity Committee.
Can I ask one question
Yes.
about the website? When do you anticipate, just because I know that's a...
We actually have a planning meeting tomorrow. Annie, do you remember, did they say 6 weeks for the website? When do we expect to have a new website? Okay, late October. Okay, so 6 to 8
Okay, so
weeks.
November 1st. Okay, all right.
And we've really looked at what we've heard from people that we really need from a website that we don't have from the current website we have. So we have high hopes. Moving on to equity, we also met 3 times. We met Thursday, July 12th at 10 a.m., Thursday, August 2nd at 9:30, and Tuesday, August 28th at 2:30. Patrick Lenahan attended equity to discuss participation within the arts and potential barriers to participation for all students. We discussed how a survey that we distributed to coaches to learn more about the access to our athletic program could be edited to reflect participation in the arts. So that we are working on a final copy of that, and Mr. Lenahan will give that out to his staff members. We are also looking to gather data about participation from students and parents. We know getting this information from our teachers is really important, but we need to hear from our families as well. On August 28th, we had the opportunity to meet with Marceline Dubois, who is the consultant who prepared our district's equity audit. When I heard she was coming to the district to train our teachers, I asked Steve if we could meet with her because we'd really like our equity work to dovetail with the work she's doing to advance the district's important work related to equity. So she really encouraged us to think bigger and develop more supportive structures for our efforts. So we look forward to continuing with that. That replaced, we were supposed to have a meeting this week, but we moved it to last week to meet with her. So our next meeting is Thursday, October 4th at 9:30 a.m., and the public is invited to attend.
Betsy, one question. Is it still an ad hoc committee on equity?
We actually discussed that at the meeting. And so from my understanding, an ad hoc committee is established when there's a need that is seen. I think there are times when an ad hoc committee becomes a permanent standing committee, when it appears that it's not a temporary a temporary period of time during which the committee is needed.
So we approved it for this year as an ad hoc.
We approved.
You could
Correct.
in future years make it a permanent
Exactly.
committee.
We could actually, the committee could propose that it become a permanent standing committee of the board, and then we would have 6 committees, not 5. I think the last committee that was started was the policy committee, which was just before we started on the board. So it happens. I think that's the beauty of the ad hoc committee, that you can start something when you need something. We know that this is not a topic that we will be done with in a few months, and I think we're sort of heading down that. It would be wonderful to go down that road. So I'll have to talk to our business administrator about how to approve it as a permanent, or at least have the discussion.
And also, when we established the equity committee, the goal was, and it always says, the board, no student will be denied participation because of money. And then we started asking, well, is this happening? And that's how the equity committee started. So it was really focused, I think, on financial equity. But I think we also have to include educational equity at this point. And I think one of the things the equity committee needs to look at is the suspension rates that are disproportionate for children of color and children with special needs. So I hope if it does become a permanent committee, that becomes part of its mission.
Mm-hmm. As well.
Yeah.
And I think for
As well,
this
yeah.
first year, we really did focus on the financial piece, but as we know from our equity audit, equity is so much more than just that. And so you're right, we have to look in lots of different directions, so thank you.
Okay, next, believe it or not, we have another public comment period, and this is on agenda items only. So if anyone, everybody got it out of their system last time. So if there is no public comment, then we'll move on to. Sure.
Come on up. Please do.
It's related to your last committee and ad hoc committee report.
You should step up to the microphone just so people at home can hear you.
Making his way.
Yep.
It's related to your last committee and ad hoc committee report, so that's on the agenda. So my question is, years ago, in another lifetime, I was on a minority education committee. And I'm wondering, is that still existent, or has this become the equity committee, which I think is a much better name for a committee of this sort? So that's question number one. And then question number two, related to that, there were some comments made about the improvements that we've seen in educational equity and achievement over the years. And I wonder if someone could actually put some numbers to that, or if it's somewhere listed someplace that I could read it.
I don't, well, you know, speaking out of turn, but I don't know if there's any measurable improvements in anything, so I don't want you to get the wrong impression. I think we've made improvements in the curriculum in terms of what we teach, especially in social studies, which is much more culturally sensitive than it once was, even a few years ago. You know, as I said, we've made improvements in the schedule, we've made improvements in the start time. I believe that teachers are teaching now in a much more sensitive way to people who learn differently. And I think that there's been a huge, I've seen in the time that, you know, since my kids have been in school, a huge shift in teacher mentality about different learning styles versus someone who's different being a problem. So when I talk about things improving, I'm talking about these kind of qualitative things that I see.
Right.
In terms of quantitative things, I don't think we have, the only quantitative evidence we have is 2 challenge success surveys which identify the exact same problem in about the exact same way.
Wow.
So nothing has really quantitatively changed yet. I think it may, and Steve, you can correct me on any of this if I'm stepping out of my lane, but I think that we may see changes in the future, but I think we've just scratched the surface. There's so much more that we need to do to make this truly a
well, this goes back
welcoming.
at least to my participation to 1993, so that was quite a while ago. And you know, I know we did some things then. I actually started a program called Academic Success Today that went on for at least 10 years, but I don't know that it's still going, that actually did some positive things. And I ran the Princeton Blairstown Center for 11 years, and some of those, many of the students from the neighborhood and throughout Princeton came to Blairstown for not only social emotional education, if you will, but also academic enhancement during the summer, and they're doing quite well. But I don't know that any of that's continued since, and it sounds like it hasn't. So that's a little scary.
If I could, sir, Mr. Davis.
Yes.
Yes. Thank you for your question. I'm not sure about the Minority Education Committee. How that function, how that did that function in the past? Was that students and?
Yeah.
I can, yeah, so can I?
Well, what I wanted to highlight were a few things. One, we did, and I referenced it earlier, but we conducted an equity audit this past year, and we had the report was presented in July, and it's, if you go on our website, we now have an equity in education page, and you will see the report there that will highlight some of the progress that we've made. I highlighted the hiring, the changes in hiring that I think are fundamental to making the more substantive changes. It highlights there some of the equity principles. It highlights there the work we've been doing on implicit bias training for all staff, and that will be ongoing. Reference there to the equity teams that we've created. So I think we're making strides, but you'll see that the report says we have a long way to go.
Sure.
And there are a series of recommendations in there. In terms of achievement, you'll see that while students of color in the Princeton Public Schools achieve at a level higher than in other districts around the state, there's still a disparity between performance of
Sure. Just one quick question. Someone threw out the number of 15%.
That's not
Okay.
That's not
I
accurate.
just-
Yeah, thank you.
I was like,
I wrote that one down too and wanted to, I think it's much,
okay.
in terms of graduation rates, I think it's much, much.
Right, well,
closer-
not the graduation
No,
rates,
going
but
to
those entering
Yeah,
college.
Right.
I think it's like 80%.
Or
Okay,
or
okay.
more.
And
Yeah.
also, one other thing
That's
that
helpful, that's helpful.
we do know, so the work of the Equity Committee, we're also looking at items such as improving communication, right? So if we want to reduce barriers to participation in something like music, we need
Sure.
to make sure that every elementary school sends the same letter that indicates that instruments are free to rent if you aren't able to afford to rent one on your own. But we need to make sure that that message goes out consistently and constantly to all the students in the district. So there have been some improvements over the course of the last 9 months, but I think we have a long way to go.
Okay.
We're working on
All
it,
right.
but please join us.
I think the other part, though, that's important to me is that it's got to be intentional and integrated in everything we do. Because if we leave it to the community that has limited resources and limited time, you know, we try these things, we do minority ed, we do all these kinds of programs, and of course, over time, they peter out. And so we have been a school district that year after year, decade after decade, have been accepting that we have this gap, this disparity in terms of how kids achieve. And so it does need to be addressed, from having administrators of color and teachers of color and, you know, opportunities for kids to all achieve at the same level. And so I think that our mindset is changing, and that's probably the most important thing of all, is that we're realizing that it is all our responsibility in this town to address these disparities, and not just the folks sitting around this table, and not just the folks who live in the John Witherspoon area or live at Griggs Farm or Reading Circle or whatever the case may be.
Right,
It's
right.
every single person's responsibility.
Thank you.
And actually, one thing, to your point, Michelle, that Marceline said, is that a lot of districts do not have equity committees, and she was very glad to see we had one, but she said by naming it and continuing to return to that work in that committee, yes, it's everyone's responsibility. Student achievement has to think about equity, finance has to think of policy, but by also having a committee that focuses solely on equity, we're ensuring that we're moving as quickly as we can.
Thank you.
Sure. Well, I'm about to step off the board, but I would give you guys my own advice, which is, it's fine to have an equity committee, but please don't ever hire a head of equity within the administration, because the head of equity has to be each principal in the building. It has to be as you said, every single person, not just someone who has a job that then they just keep going forever and the problem never gets solved.
That's right.
So-
What did she say? Equity in all we do.
all we do, exactly. Okay, so let's move forward then. If that's public comment, then we're now on item J, which is policies. And and we're going to go through the consent items. So
Policy is a vote.
is a vote. Okay, so that's on second reading, the policies on item J1. Any questions or comments on these policies?
We need a first and a second.
Sorry, first and second to discuss. Betsy and Debbie.
I guess, what's happening with the policies that, I guess were proprietary, Greg? So like, for example, you're replacing the civility policy, and that was something, so I just want to know, when you are reviewing these policies, are you taking into account the wording that was in the prior policy? Yes?
Yes, and thanks, Daphne, for setting this up. I mean, just to very, very brief, because I know it's very late. The first set of policies that are on the agenda are the 1000 policy section. It's communication and relationships with the public. So there's a lot of different aspects, and civility is one of them.
Mm-hmm.
It's one I know that as a policy committee last year, we worked on the wording. NJSBA, when they took a look at that, they reviewed our wording and tried to keep it wherever possible. I compared the two. And they're very similar, and then they also updated it to their standards and added in the cross-references as well. So they tried to keep our original wording as much as possible.
So this will still be sent to families annually? Yeah. Okay, great.
Yep. And it
Yeah,
was
it
this
was.
year,
I just wanted to make
and
sure.
that's a really good point, because this year, because we haven't gotten it out for second reading and passed it, the version that was sent out was the old version. And so assuming we pass it next year, it would be the new version. And that's why we want to get as many of these done as quickly as possible, so we don't have that lag.
So which is in effect now, like tomorrow?
The
old, four.
Well,
This won't be in effect tomorrow, if you approve it.
But then will you resend it to the community? Only because, I mean, I'm sure there's not that much change, but we sent the community another
Maybe
policy
it'll-
that we're superseding now.
Maybe it'll be sent on the communications update from this meeting, and we could note that this is the updated policy.
Oh, like a hyperlink?
well, it's also,
Okay.
once we get this section, it'll be posted on board docs. So that's, I think, is most important.
So I'll tell you, we had a civility policy in we had a civility policy in Boy Scouts many years ago, and it would not be distributed to the families, and then some incident would happen, and then we go, wait a minute, we got to distribute that policy to all the families, so that when the next thing happens, we can say, oh, here's the policy, see, so you can't do that, you know, and so it's good to have one, but it's really good to circulate it, because that's what it's really for. It's not really prophylactic. Things are going to happen, but when they do, at least you have something that you can say, hey, we circulated this to everybody. Everybody should know that this is the way we expect you to behave. Everybody, parents, people in this room, everybody. So, and it would be good to if we can to circulate it. But
Say yea, nay, or abstain, read right above the line in the permanent minutes and made available.
there you go.
District website.
Okay.
Right, but we're going to include a hyperlink.
But I think some policies have to be sent to every parent. I think that's what the mailing was this past week.
Yes, required
And
by
so
state
that's the
regulation.
question, do we resend as the?
Oh.
And we are.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I commend the policy committee when Daphne and I, this process was coming of changing over the policy manual. It is an enormous job, so thank you for your attention to doing.
Sorry,
it.
Betsy, I didn't understand that. It's like,
Yeah, no.
Question on policy 1312. Are we about to vote on that one right now?
Yes.
Because I have some trouble with the language. When a board member is confronted with an issue, she will withhold comment, commitment, and/or opinion, and refer the complaint or inquiry to the superintendent. I'm thinking that I'm applying it to situations I've encountered. It's like the alarms going off at the high school and the neighborhood people talking to me about that on Moore Street. So I sent out an email as being on the facility committee saying, can we address this? And I think Gary got included. So I guess I don't like being limited to somebody coming and say, the alarm is going off at 3 a.m. and it's driving me crazy. It goes on for half an hour and I can't sleep, and me going, okay.
Good to know.
I'll let Steve know.
Yeah, I still think, I just don't like,
We're abdicating.
I'm fine with when a board member is confronted with an issue, comma, she will refer the complaint or inquiry to the superintendent. I don't like withhold comment, commitment, and/or opinion.
Well, commitment, you're not committing that but commitment I'm okay with. You can't commit.
Well, commitment
on-
is let me look into it, let me get in touch
Right, but you
with
can't say,
somebody.
we'll fix it tomorrow.
Yeah, but
Right.
I'm just saying,
Yeah.
let me look into it. I don't like, as representatives, elected representatives, to be told, you can't tell your neighbor, oh, that's really miserable. I don't know how you deal with it. Let me see what I can do to help out. It just rubbed me really wrong, because I know I will continue to do that, whether this language is in there or not.
We do that a lot in personnel. We get a lot of stuff to us.
And one more thing, and I apologize for not bringing this up earlier, but I thought we were going, for the pronouns, I thought we were going to they, as opposed to he, she.
We probably should, yeah.
Okay.
I don't know.
You can't read my mind?
Well, I think, Bill, the reason for that withhold the comment and the reason that that's policy is, just like any lawyer, I'm sure you would say, in an accident, don't jump out of the car and say it's my fault. And it'll be resolved in a court of law. So it's the same thing here. I think what it's getting to is we don't want a board, when something comes to a board member's attention, we don't want that person to say, what, that's outrageous, how could that ever happen here? And, you know, someone, we clearly must have been negligent, and we suddenly put ourselves in a bad legal position. It's rather to bring it up the chain of command, and we'll get to the right answer eventually, but we don't. So that's.
It's about board members flying at 30,000 feet and then referring things to the
Appropriate
administration.
administration.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, yeah, because it happened today.
But I think that
It
is
happened today. What happened? You know what happened today.
No, but that's the better practice, to bring it up the chain
Had to
and
do with
not.
transportation.
But not forget about it, but bring it up the chain and then get back and do good constituent service, but, yeah.
And
Yeah.
and just to build off of that, yeah, and just exactly, it's our. Oh, sorry. Sorry. So the policies are grounded in state law, and so that's a really good, point that our code of ethics that we all take as board members is grounded in the same statutes that this policy is grounded in. And so every year, and we know this, but I think the members of the public may not, and so this is a good guide for the members of the public. We take an oath that, for example, I will confine my board action to policy making, planning, and appraisal. I will help to frame policies and plans only after the board has consulted those who will be affected by them. I will carry out my responsibility not to administer the schools, but together with my fellow board members to see that they are well run. And there's a number of other items like that. And this is exactly the foundation of the policy. So I think it really is that 30,000 feet, that what are our roles vis-a-vis the district and the administrators. And that's the spirit of this policy.
If it said that in front of he, she, it said it is recommended that he or she withhold comment, commitment, or opinion, then I'd be a lot more comfortable with it. But suppose I do get the complaint from a neighbor talking about the alarm going off at 3 in the morning. I go, God, I don't think I'd be able to sleep either if it's in my back window. I've just made a comment, and I've just given an opinion. And I say, let me try to see if we can deal with this in facilities committee, or, I will forward it to the superintendent. So I've just now broken our policy. Is that? Yeah, and I don't think I've done anything wrong.
No, but you have.
No, I totally disagree that I've done anything wrong.
No, but by the Board of Ethics.
Then I think this is wrong, and I don't think
We can't insert ourselves as board members. We're one of 9.
all I've done is say, wow, I can't imagine trying to sleep through that either.
But it's more likely it's going to be something more personal.
That's why I
than
think
that.
it
It's
should
more
be said-
likely to be, hey, this happened to my child at school, and a board member says that's outrageous, without knowing what the principal did, or, you know what I mean? And so I think that's what it's more getting to.
Will is too strong of a statement. It's too, it's a black-white. If it said, it is recommended that he, she should withhold.
They withhold? They.
Oh, they.
It's limited, I mean, as individuals, we can't speak on behalf of the board. We are only the board when we're constituted as a board, and so I think it's just clarifying our appropriate role.
I see what he's saying, though. I mean, and I've chafed under this too.
Yeah.
But I don't think everything I say is speaking for the board. I think that I speak as an individual, and if I say, yeah, that really stinks, that's not speaking for the board that the board says it really stinks. I say it really stinks.
Right.
And I will take your complaint to somebody who can do something about it. I mean, you can express.
You've just violated this policy at that point.
What, that I said it really stinks?
Yeah. And so that's the
Or-
problem.
But don't you all say so many times? I say it all the time. I'm speaking as a parent.
yeah,
I'm
right.
speaking as a taxpayer.
As a resident,
And
like, that
please
fire
don't
alarm
take
would
this
bother
email
me.
as a board member. But I think clarifying.
Contacts you as a board member?
Then you say, are you asking me as a board member?
No,
And
no,
then,
the email means that I know you're the head of personnel, blah, 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 blah. So.
and then you send it up the line.
But you-
That's
but-
what this
but
policy
you
is
acknowledge
telling
the-
you.
But you acknowledge the email, and that's in violation of the,
By acknowledging the email?
well, without comment, withhold comment, right?
You can say thank you. Thank you, I'll forward it on to.
I will forward it. It says that you can say, I will forward it to the superintendent. It's the rule. I mean, that's why we end up looking like, that's why we end up looking like.
We can clarify this with
We should
Jesse
talk about it on Friday. It
On
would be
Friday.
great. Would you like us to table that?
Yeah, I would like to see this one tabled.
Would you like us to table it and then we can talk about it on Friday? Because I
I'd be
think
happy.
it's really
That's-
good boardsmanship and
Yeah.
it would be really good for our board, our board workshop.
That's a really good idea, and it's a good venue for it as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
But I like the rest of the policy.
Great.
Just the word will.
Can I change my vote to say, can we change votes, or you just?
I can't fix it now, so I just gotta write.
Okay.
We'll
What's
fig-
the one?
So how about if we just,
Should we abstain if we?
can we just say
already voted?
subject to some,
No.
no.
I'll just,
I mean, I'm happy to vote for it because I'm fine with it. We could vote for it and Bill could go down the tubes with it, but.
Yeah.
Sorry. But we could discuss it on,
Is-
That's definitely not.
Okay, so what are we doing instead? We gotta, my goal is to adjourn before midnight. I know.
Actually, members of the board, I have to pick my daughter up at the train station at 11:30. I thought that was a pretty safe bet since
Yeah.
she's coming in from JFK on an international flight. So, like, I do have to leave in about 5 minutes.
Okay.
Yeah.
I thought that was safe.
Okay, we have a quorum, yeah.
But we have a quorum. I know, exactly. But, so I will have to excuse myself in about,
That's fine, Evelyn.
in about 5 minutes. I'm sorry.
Okay.
It'll be the first day of school. The sunrise.
I know. Sorry. The first comment was, no, I can't pick you up at the airport.
I'll just do, I'll fix it.
Okay.
Okay, let's move
So what
forward.
do we do on the,
You can vote and it minus, we're all no, it's gonna be minus 13, 12,
It is
Okay,
minus 13.
and as we're voting, just one other thing, there is another, outside of the section 1000, there's something that was up last year and is up again this year, and it's the use of, sorry, not use of schools, it's naming of facilities, and I did want to let the board and the public know that it's up for second vote, second reading. It was discussed extensively in last year's policy committee. We decided to table it. We've discussed it extensively in this year's policy committee. There were feelings on both sides. As we approach, though, a possible referendum vote, we did want to put this back on, and what it would do is that it would not allow any school building to be named for an individual, but that does not mean that we would not be more than happy to name a garden, a theater, an atrium, or any other part for an individual if that individual is worthy of it or would happen to be interested in donating. So that does not exclude any of that. It's just the school itself. And part of the argument was that we have a history of our neighborhood elementary schools that's rich, that the neighborhoods are named around those schools, and we wanted to honor that history as well. So, so I did want to flag that.
Okay. All right, so we've all voted on J1 or not yet?
Okay, so I already wrote in there, all except policy 1312, which was tabled for word edit.
Okay.
Thank you.
Great. All right. Oh, so we got to tally the votes.
Isn't that illegal? Wasn't Napster the one they all got caught?
I used to love that one. Of course, it was a 14.4.
Are we presenting?
Yeah, they're all like this. They're no different.
No to our student.
No to Valerie.
Oh.
And I said, I hope you're not reconsidering.
Okay.
I think we voted, yeah.
Make sure this, I refreshed it, but I have to make sure the action is good.
Okay, so we are on item K, which is a roll call.
Everybody see?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's unanimous.
Okay, on to item K. Need a motion?
Oh, yep.
Debbie, in a second. Beth? Any questions or comments on the personnel actions?
I'll be-
Also on the blue sheet, I think, that,
I'll be very brief. Debbie and I got to come, well, we chose to come the first day of when all the new staff was gathered, and Lou invited members of the board to be there. And I am a former teacher. I remember what the first day of school feels like, but especially your very first day in a new district. It's so exciting. And these teachers and staff members got up and introduced themselves with so much warmth and joy, and we're so lucky to have you all. I know that you're sleeping to prepare for tomorrow, but we're all rooting for you. So thanks for working with our
nice to
kids.
say that, yeah.
and I guess I'd also like to just shout out to Lou, even though it's late and everyone's gone home, but Lou and your staff put in a tremendous amount of work over the last month, hiring all these new people and, making a lot of, good decisions, but a huge volume of great decisions. So thank you for all your hard work and,
Absolutely.
and building this
Yeah.
team. So it's
Hear,
very
hear.
exciting.
We're excited.
This is a roll call vote, and I'm just taking. Okay, so. Patrick Sullivan.
Yes.
Turn the microphone. Patrick Sullivan.
Yes.
Betsy Baglia.
Yes.
Beth Barron.
Yes.
Debbie Braunfeld.
Yes.
Jessica Deutsch.
Yes.
Bill Hare.
Yes.
Daphne Kendall.
Yes.
Evelyn Spahn, not present at the vote. And Greg Stinkowitz.
Yes.
And Michelle Tuck Ponder. Okay, thank you, it passes. Okay, the next one is an individual vote too.
Oh, the sidebar agreement.
Yeah.
K2, so I need a motion on K2.
So move.
Michelle, and a second, Betsy. This is a roll call as well, or is it?
Yes, it
like a
is, because
roll
it's,
call?
yes. So it was Michelle and Betsy?
Any questions or comments on the agreement?
I would just echo our congratulations for doing this, and one really exciting thing is that there's room for new clubs to be suggested. So at the middle school level and the high school level, what they'll be doing is there's some money in there for the first year if you get a club going, and after 2 years, I think at that rate, if there's enough people who are, students who are interested, and I think that's really great that we have included that, so thank you all.
Great, thank you. Roll call.
Patrick Sullivan?
Yes.
Betsy Baglia?
Yes.
Beth Barron?
Yeah.
Debbie Braunfeld?
Yes.
Jessica Deutsch?
Yes.
Bill Hare?
Yes.
Daphne Kendall?
Yes.
Evelyn Spahn, not present at vote. Greg Stinkowitz?
Yes.
And Michelle Tuck Ponder?
Yes.
Thank you. Motion
Okay,
passes.
so any questions on 3 or 4, which are consent? And if there's not, then we'll move to item L. And I believe that the entire item L is a consent item. So any
No.
questions on?
One is not.
Oh, one-
Equity and initiatives.
L5.
L, oh, I see, L5 is not, okay. So let's have a motion for L1 through 4, how about that to start?
It would be 1 through 11 minus 5.
1 through 11 minus 5,
Wait a minute, that's all in.
Consent. That's
in consent, so this is just for discussion.
I'm gonna do it all for discussion.
Yeah, so all of L for discussion, okay. Yes,
No?
no, we need a motion.
Oh.
Debbie, and a second,
No way.
Beth,
No.
yeah.
So if we're doing consent, we just want to talk about them. If you have comment,
Yes, but we need a motion before we talk.
yes.
So I'm opening the floor for all of L.
Yeah.
Okay, that's all. So am I learning? Yeah, okay.
All right. It was Debbie and Betsy.
Yeah, Debbie and Betsy.
Okay,
Okay, so now,
so
any questions or
I
comments on
have a question on L5. So I have a lot of difficulty understanding why we have to put this out. I feel we've done all the equity, we've had, our circles. I feel like we're doing so much, and I get confused why we need, it's like, to me, it's another mission statement. And I'm curious, was this to replace that other policy where you guys had done once and they just had no, what's the word I was looking for? There was no action. Right. So I don't know if this is replacing that, and that's never happening. I just didn't understand why we needed this, because I feel like it's another mission statement. I'm not sure.
Sure,
I'm
let me
not sure
take
what
a,
it
let,
is.
let me start, and then I'll let the rest of the policy committee, jump in on this. This includes some of the language that was in the policy that was on for first reading. Some members of the board were looking for action statements, and so we decided to table that because of the work that's ongoing right now with the study circles and others, and we heard from members of the community asking that we don't put in action yet in terms of punishments or suspensions, but to allow the community and allow student voices, allow teachers and administrators to discuss this issue in terms of the issue of equity, as Daphne was talking about, in terms of disparate suspensions and things like that. So we as a policy committee, took the stand that we want to hear the voices of our teachers and our students and our administrators. They're going to report back to us as a board and us as a policy committee, and then we'll take action. We want to hear their voices first. We feel that they know better than we do, but we do want to honor, and I think tonight was a very good example of how equity is interwoven in so much of the work we do. So it's the wonderful work that the Equity Committee is doing, but it's also the wonderful work that Student Achievement Committee is doing, that we at policy want to move along in together with everyone else, and the wonderful work that's already been done. So our thought was, and we heard this from some members of the public, we wanted to put out a value statement, and we did that as a resolution rather than as a policy. For now, I mean, we'll be revisiting the policy in due course, but right now we wanted to do a resolution as a statement of values of the entire board of exactly what you saw this evening, that how intertwined equity is, so that it involves all 5 of our strategic goals in our strategic plan. It involves so much great work that's already been done over the summer, over last year in terms of hiring. But we also wanted to acknowledge that there's a lot of work still left to do. The equity audit showed us that, and so this is a way of basically, we felt, bringing us together for those members who would like to vote for that, to reestablish our commitment going forward. And there's actually an item in there that we specifically in Policy Committee want to work on this year, and it's a pledge to the public that we are going to be working on that, and that is to help establish a type of reporting system for bias incidents that is comfortable, effective, that provides the type of services that whoever is reporting can live with. And so this was our sort of announcement that that's one of our goals for the upcoming year. And we saw that as a way of honoring the work and honoring the work still left to do. And that's why we are placing this in front of the full board for consideration.
Why don't we just come up, like on Friday, with a board goal? I don't know. It's not working for me, but...
I think in our last meeting, we heard from Marceline, and we heard about the work, and we took it seriously. And I think the idea here is just to show the community that we were listening last meeting, we're taking this seriously, we have a lot of work to do, and we want to give a statement before, because we're not in a position to give kind of concrete next steps until some of this work is done. So I think the idea was we're trying to show our support and let people know that we talk about this a lot, but let's just take a resolution and show that we really take it seriously, and we've got work to do.
But, so I think we showed that we took it seriously by hiring Marceline to deliver that report, but it's fine. The one thing that's wrong with the wording is I don't see anything in there about learning difference, and it says physical, mental attributes, which rubs me the wrong way. Disability, maybe? I don't know, but I'll speak for Betsy too. We've been working on something like this for 2 years. We tried to get the code of conduct at the high school updated, and we have been going in a circle. So I understand where you're coming from, but this resolution doesn't change anything. I think we've showed we're committed to, we're trying, and we're trying to get everyone on board, but we haven't addressed the code. So if you can promise me by the end of the year, the code of conduct, people in the community, we had that swastika incident last year. People were not happy, that there weren't appropriate consequences for that kind of behavior. So, like, I'm fine with this if we can change the wording. But to say that we're hearing you now, I think we have been trying to, and.
But we haven't, the problem is that we have, and I sound like a broken record. How many decades, how many people have gone through this school district and felt that we have not been committed to it? And so when we talk about being committed to equity, you got to walk the walk, talk the talk, and have it infused in everything you do. And I think that that's what this statement says. This is what we're going to do. In addition to doing the things that we try to do, because they fade away too quickly. People lose interest, they feel like they're not effective, whatever the case may be. But there's been a lot of boards before this board that have tried. And I think anything we can do to remind ourselves that we're all in on this is something that's helpful. I mean, and we can wordsmith it, we can change things if people are uncomfortable, but I think that it's really important that as a body, we make this kind of commitment to ourselves and to the community.
And to the kids, and I think, and so, I don't think it's wordsmithing. I think, I understand, children of color could be treated better in the district, and children with special needs could also be treated better in this district. And I think we need to include them in this, because it seems like every other group is included.
And I would also say, I do see this as a statement of support, as you said, and a stepping stone. It's we putting something up. We know that we need to create, and we know how hard it is to do that, to create a policy and procedures for every school to follow. But we're talking about it in personnel. We're talking about it in student achievement. Lou and I worked over the summer, actually, and Brenda worked on it, really, the chain of command. And I'm not sure if that's on the website yet. It's sort of a roadmap to say to parents, if you have an issue with a bus driver, here's who your first call is, here's who your second call is. If you have a question about your child's curriculum, here's who, and so it just gives people a little bit more information. But I think we're also really thinking about when a parent has a sensitive concern that they want to get to somebody, where does that go? And this is a statement saying we will create that.
I think the discussion was about creating a reference point and something that we can continue.
Microphone. Everyone to hear.
I think this is about creating a reference point that builds upon the work that's been done recently and acknowledges that the work has been, that there's been an effort for such a long time, but we're committing ourselves and we're building a foundation along with the work that Marceline is bringing and that we're hearing from the community. And making the statement is just a way of sort of reiterating it and keeping it in front of ourselves as we commit to this as a long-term project that has also immediate needs for concrete development. So I think it's all of those things together. I don't think it's the end or the be all, but it's a way of keeping it in front and center where I think we all agree we want it to be.
And Daphne, I think, we're all very grateful to you for your advocacy for special needs children. And so we tried to incorporate that. And this portion I didn't write, so I can praise it because it's not my own writing, but it's the writing of the rest of the policy committee. It's that the Princeton Board of Education affirms the right of every student, teacher, staff member, employee, parent, and all those present in our schools to be free of bias-related or hate-motivated behavior from any person or institution. And then it goes on to say that behaviors or statements that seek to degrade or diminish an individual or group on the basis of race, ethnicity, culture, heritage, immigration status, sexual orientation, gender identity, gender expression, disability, physical, mental attributes, religious beliefs or practices, or based on association with a person or a group with one or more of these actual or perceived characteristics shall not be tolerated. I think that's a strong statement of values and beliefs.
But learning disabled children wouldn't be included under that.
You can add that in.
Sure.
Oh, that's what I'm saying.
We're more than happy to add in, and however you want to phrase it.
I think we've used learning, I think Steve's term is learning differences, so we should be consistent.
We have the equity statement too that we've quoted. We have a list of, we might want to use the same exact one. That's a good idea to make it consistent.
So I was just thinking of my own practical experiences, and this is great. I think it's great work. So appreciate all you've done on it, and I think it is a good start, like you said, Jess. But when I think about my own experiences through the years with my own kids, I'm sure we all have things like this, but I remember my daughter reporting that a teacher picks on the Hispanic kids in the class and says they're talking when they're not. I've had teachers who don't respect special education and what it stands for, and didn't respect IEPs. And you know, we had bullying incidents in middle school with the lunch, staff who take kids and are very insensitive to how middle schoolers putting kids who aren't part of a group with someone else and saying sit there and stay there for the rest of the year, and just kind of bullying stuff. Some things we put up to how we push forward. Some things we didn't even know, even I didn't know as a board member how to advance that along. And so my question is, and I'm sure everyone's, and we know from our experience as board members, other horrible incidents that have happened, right? So how does it get to a point where someone really knows? Is that what you were talking about with these kinds of
The roadmap?
the roadmap and the kind of the chain of command, where in the future a parent who hears that can say, hey, I heard, it's not a big deal, I don't know, I don't have all the evidence, but I wanted someone in the administration to know this. Or I want you to hear what they said to my child yesterday, and that it gets heard, and it's not just like, oh, well, those people, those teachers are like that, and
We can write all we want, but
yeah.
we don't have a real system.
Exactly, it's got to be a system. It can't just be a resolution.
Right.
Yep.
Only 30% of the teachers at the high school believe that something would happen in convince them.
Well, that was a really telling
Right? That to me
thing
is
from the
26.
equity survey.
26. I mean,
Yeah.
in any other organization, that would be a shocking statistic.
I was shocked by
which
that.
require-
Yep, it was actually less than 30%, but
Yeah. Well, the only good news is they all thought that they would
yeah.
do something.
Right.
They just thought their colleagues would do it. Yeah.
I will say that based on the study circles have met 3 times now. We're going to add at least 2 more meetings in September and October, but of the findings in the equity audit, the one we agreed to focus on first was number 5, which was our response to issues of oppression and bias. So we're developing a statement around that and action items. So that we're going to be coming forward with some recommendations in that regard.
Okay. As long as it has some, that you guys are working towards. I'm already speaking in the past tense here.
Well, that's the,
Yeah.
and then that honestly is the other reason for a board to have a policy like this, because board composition changes, administrators change, and you want to be able to make this statement that is lasting.
Right, like that gentleman here tonight who said, oh, I was doing this thing in
Right.
2003. What happened to it? And we're like,
Right.
we don't know. So we got to make sure that it lasts.
But that's like the most frustrating thing, is that you hear about the achievement gap and this and that, and it's been on 30 years and nothing, and now we're part of that, right? We're part of the status quo.
So
That's what's
I think we
frustrating.
just want
I
to
don't
put
see it.
something in the record in this meeting, because we had the report the last meeting, and we know this work is going on. We want to show them that we're listening, we're waiting, and we want to work with whatever they come up with. We put this line in the sand, we say something, we put it in writing. Here it is. And I'm very, open to however you want to, if you want to change.
Just put in learning differences or, yeah,
Well,
thank you.
So, I mean, the question is, can we
Can do
move
that.
forward on it, subject to that modification?
Yeah, if you want to add the.
Can you edit it right now and then vote on it?
I think that's, well, the equity statement, I think it was from the equity page on the website.
Okay.
I quoted you from July 2018. It said, it's focused on ensuring all students, regardless of race, religion, gender, sexual identification, country of origin, cultural affiliation, language spoken, learning difference, or economic background, are celebrated in our schools and achieve their highest potential. So I can email you that language, but maybe keeping it consistent.
I think that's smart.
So we just can replace the language that defines the number of attributes with the one that we've already approved on the website. I mean, it sounds like that may be a more comprehensive list than what we have in here.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
I don't know.
Cross-check them all.
Cross-check, back-check.
I don't think
Sure.
I'm not sure disability is in that list. Physical disability is in there.
Oh, that's true.
Okay. So I think we all know what we want. But
But nobody would ever be open.
Okay, so we've got this one amendment? or
Yeah,
one-
other than, right.
So the amendment would be to add learning differences to the list we have.
So I think they wanted, Betsy had a suggestion to make it consistent with what's on the website. But then Steve,
maybe we need
we
to
might
put
need
what's on
to
the website.
add to that. So you could
I'll
add,
send you, I
Subject to
just
revision,
emailed
right?
you what's on the website.
Okay,
I think it's important if we can approve it tonight. I don't want to go back and
great, okay.
swirl around
With
the
the
brain
most
forever.
comprehensive listing of attributes that we have, either
Yeah.
on the website or here.
So that's a minor adjustment.
that's a minor.
Like,
Mhm.
you know, what do they do in the federal government? They revise it in committee, right? The reconciliation in reconciliation. So we can reconcile the language.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, so we can vote on, so this was all number 5. This was, Debbie, this started back
Yeah, I don't know,
with your
so I don't know how we
question
vote.
about number 5. But we have to vote, we're gonna vote on 5 first and then go back, 1, 4, and,
No, we're gonna vote on 5, and then we're gonna go through the rest of the agenda.
of course, right, then we go, right.
Other action
I
items.
know.
Yes.
I know. That's
Okay.
where we messed up.
So we're gonna have a vote on
Shoulda had
5.
snacks.
Yes, please.
Okay.
Yes, please vote on 5. L5.
It hasn't come up.
Okay. Oh, I gotta refresh again. So that was Debbie and, or was it Michelle and Debbie, or Debbie and Michelle?
It was Michelle and Debbie.
Thank you, because that went away too. Okay, you should see it.
Yeah.
Okay.
You got
It
yours?
just showed
I didn't
up.
get mine yet.
Oh, wait a minute.
There it is. Oh, there it is.
What did I just vote?
Oh, yeah.
I had 2 things.
Oh,
It was an error the first time.
Yeah.
Oh.
Okay, motion passes as edited.
Okay, so
There we
this
go.
moves us on to item M. If there's no other questions or comments on L. So now we're on item M, Student
Which-
Services and Special Education. Any questions there?
we have to make a motion.
No, no,
No?
just,
Oh,
This-
this is consent, so,
yeah, just,
I have
that's
a
all
que-
part of the consent.
So
yeah.
I have a question, Steve.
yes.
So we're adding new, it looks like we're adding a new special ed programs, and then we're taking a preschool disability class away. And I just wanted to know, like, is one
They're
replacing
just- Yeah.
the other?
Yeah, so we're taking, limiting the one at Riverside, and then adding, is it the one at
Little Brook?
Yeah.
And-
Yeah, the room at Riverside wasn't good for the program.
Why?
I think the they wouldn't have a bathroom or something.
So there wasn't room for the kids at Riverside?
Right, the room that they thought
Yeah.
they were going to use, the physical room, wasn't correct, but Little Brook had a room that was much more appropriate.
We added a multiple disabilities class.
At NJW, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yes.
You know, I think that's really great. My daughter has a friend who's going into 6th grade who they were looking at out-of-district placements that the district was going to pay for, and they really wanted the child to be in the least restrictive environment, and Mickey, made that happen. So it's a very nice story.
Yep.
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 Okay. So there's no, everything's consent on M?
Correct.
Okay, so that now, any discussion on N?
N8 and N9, the YWCA aftercare program and YMCA facility use. These are simply contracts to allow the YW and the YM to rent our space, but they provide aftercare for our kids.
Yes.
And so we've heard many times from parents who are dissatisfied for one reason or another with the quality of these programs. my children have not been in them. I can't speak from personal experience. But I understand we need a contract because we need to provide an aftercare program to our families. But I would challenge us to think outside the box as we go down in time and have some more time to think about our students, which are the most important work. I will add this topic to student achievement meetings, but I think we need to make sure that we check in with parents about how do they feel about the program. We did ask a question in the parent surveys, so when that information comes out, we can look at that. But I think, as a parent really eloquently, I think emailed Michelle and me that a child in a school thinks every single adult in that school is a teacher hired by the school. And that the program in the school is something that we all, so even though we're just providing a contract, and some of these programs are wonderful, but I think let's just engage a little bit more than just approving a contract and make sure that the quality of program is high and that parents are and students are happy with the program. And if that is not the case, maybe there's other outside the box thinking that we can engage in, so.
Can we ask for their program analysis? Sorry. Could we ask both Ys for their, like program analysis? I don't know, like when the kids show up at 3:05, they do this, it's, 10.
I actually met with one of the providers this summer, and my children both were in the after-school programs at CP. And I think that, from my experience, I used to be on the board of New Jersey After 3, which considered after-school programs as continued learning, and really were able to document how involvement in after-school programs that had a actual curriculum and learning motif would help kids improve their performance in school. So what happens is, for a lot of parents, they're getting home from work, they're swooping in, picking up their kid, making dinner, and then putting them to bed. But that 2 hours after school, that 3 hours after school, that if your kid's at home, you might make them read or do, enrichment things. They weren't getting it in the after-school program. And so I think Betsy's right. I think if we're going to let it happen in our school building, and people who go to that program consider it to be part of our school program, then we ought to know something more substantively about it, as opposed to just signing a lease and saying, do whatever you're going to do. And that's what we have right now. And sometimes it's good, and sometimes it's not so good.
And they have, because both my boys did it too, they have such turnover with their staff, which makes sense for the pay.
They don't pay them that much.
Right, for the pay. So that you're right, like one teacher could be fabulous. I mean, caretaker, whatever, and another not.
Yeah. So that I'd agree with that, Betsy. I'd second that.
Okay. I'd also like, on number 7, I'd like to thank PEF for the generous gift of $11,000 for furniture. PEF does so much great work on behalf of all of our kids in our schools. So, again, we appreciate their work in raising these funds and the donation that they made.
Yeah, and Dr. Eddie Cohen has been working very hard. So the background, this is kind of like the furniture that would be included in the referendum. So it's like and I think he hopes to have something in place for back to school night on September 27th. But Eddie's been working hard to get it in place. And so it would be interesting for people to see the type of furniture that we're talking about.
That's great. Yeah. Because we've been criticized for the furniture, among many things. So it'd be nice if we could have someone try it out and enjoy it.
I currently have N8 as a separate vote.
N8.
That was the YW.
Okay.
The other, the YM is, no, you don't want it as a separate vote?
8 and 9?
No, just 8 is, so I either.
I feel that we have to approve it because we have to have something for tomorrow for our students. But I think we're approving it with the condition that we really engage this year so that when we come to this time next year, it's not simply, I'm not sure if we can, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think we can change the contract unless they agree to that. But I think, Steve, do you ever meet with the directors of the Y or the YM or the YW? Can we ask principals to reach out to parents to get more ongoing information?
Could we ask someone like PEF to fund YW to enhance the program and hire more people, and then have YW provide it to us? Because we can't take a 501c3, we can't give a tax deduction, but maybe you can get a,
Right, or I would even say, this is outside the box thinking, but our district could potentially partner even with these existing institutions to pay our teach, there's all kinds of things we could think
Right,
about.
there are.
They're already providing sometimes, I think, at Riverside, there was special. Microphone. I think they do, I think that's happened in the past. There's been special enrichment that's come in through the Y, and I don't exactly know how it works, but we should understand it.
And
well,
whether
you'd think
the,
Princeton University too would have
that's a
talent
possibility, and also
that we
whether
could
the
use.
two programs are equally well received by the students that they, I just think we have to dig into it a little bit more. I think it's our responsibility, and we'll just put it on student achievement. We'll start talking about that, but, you know, Steve, if you meet with them, we want to improve, as I'm sure they always want to continually
Right.
improve.
I will mention that Monique Jones, who works at the middle school, also is has a stipend to work with the YM to ensure that there's connection between what's being taught in the classrooms at those schools and that the kids are getting that kind of support in the after-school program. So she's our liaison with the YMCA.
So,
Which is at
Little Brook and JP. Right. So I would say that's wonderful that we have a connection from our staff. And when we talk about making things, you know, consistent across the district and equitable, we should make sure that the YW at CP and Riverside have a similar connection to our district to make
You
sure
can look at that. It's required by the YMCA's bylaws. It's a new addition nationally in the past couple of
But
years.
not by the YW. That's interesting.
So, yeah,
All right. Well, I think it's, maybe we could even, can we invite them to student achievement even though we don't evaluate their programs? Could we invite them to talk about what they do?
Invite anybody?
There are tenants, I suppose, so we could ask about their programs. Okay, great.
I changed it to action consent, is that okay?
Sure,
The Ys.
okay,
Yeah.
fine. We have 15
Do you want
minutes
it or no
before
want
we turn this into
Return to
tomorrow.
pumpkins,
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, okay, so everything else on M is consent, and so that gets us to N? Or, sorry,
No, you were just.
we just did N,
Yes.
so we're on O.
Oh,
Yes.
And O is
So-
the thing that we already talked about, Stephanie, thank you for
That's
saving us
correct,
$150,000 a year.
Mm-hmm.
And that gets us to P, which is the consent vote on all of these items.
Yes, but you want to skip over that, if you don't mind, into the referendum and election section, because there's a consent item in there, too, we can talk about real quick. That's the civil engineer services, which are already approved. The civil engineer CME was already approved before. This is just authorizing pre-referendum dollars to be spent to get the 5-6 studies underway, to speed that process up.
Okay,
Okay, so that would be under the consent.
That's under consent?
Yes.
Can we pull that?
Yes.
pull it and do what with it?
Vote on it separately?
Vote on it separately? Sure.
That's Q2, right?
Q1.
Do you need a
Q1.
motion or anything to pull, or we're just gonna do it and vote separately?
No, I'm gonna separate it, I gotta
Okay.
separate it.
is that something, given that now we're delayed a month, is that something that should still be on this month's agenda? Or
It
is
would be, because we wouldn't contract with them. This is just putting the piece in place
Okay,
to contract with them. You know, they'll do some preliminary work, surveying the land, but they're not gonna jump into a whole lot. This is really just the bridge for what we thought would be a November election, that, like November 7th, they
Right.
could jump in and start doing it to speed up the 5-6 process.
So they won't.
They won't do any
They
work.
won't incur these 50,000.
Okay.
In what?
The 50,000 and will not be incurred until the vote? You're saying there's some preliminary work that's already.
Minimal preliminary, but once there's a little bit right now, but once the referendum passes, then they would start right away,
Yeah, I
as
understand,
opposed to
on day
when,
two,
yeah. But they wouldn't do this work,
Without this, without a yes vote.
yeah, they would all right, let me correct that. They would do some of it, in
So we
order
don't
to.
know how much they would expend on that
No.
sum,
Right,
right?
yes,
We're not clear.
and then, yes. And the reason for that is because there's a long DEP review process.
Right.
So they want to get, to be able to
Start.
contract the DEP to start looking at it before the vote. So it's just to help the speed of the 5-6 up. So you want me to change it to action or leave it action consent?
Action.
Okay, so we're gonna vote on that first,
Yeah,
and
vote on
then
that
all the other
first.
consents?
I just wonder, maybe we could table that until our later September meeting?
I think,
Why?
Because, well, we're gonna have a retreat this weekend. I think maybe we could,
the Speisel thing?
the engineer, the pre-work.
Why? It's just, we don't have to spend it if we don't, I mean, it's fine, whatever everybody wants to do.
I think, yeah.
I thought we were doing that with the, on the belief that we would get it done early so we would be able to open this 5-6 school
By 2020.
on the right, on the first day possible. And if there's not a shot at that,
That was why we
yeah,
even considered it. If there's no, yeah.
yeah, if there's no way we can open on
Get
the
to-
day we thought we would, even if we spent that 50,
So you
Then
want
why
to
spend
table
it?
that one then?
what's that, Michelle?
Then we shouldn't spend the 50.
Yeah.
We're not gonna spend it unless they do the work, and they won't do the work.
Some, you just said you'd spend some.
Well, not if they're not directed to. This just allows them to. So if you don't want, if you want to table, we'll table that. I just,
Okay.
Thanks, Stephanie.
so what are we doing? Tabling it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so that leaves just the
I'm just gonna
consent.
make sure that it's, no, there's an action item.
Oh, another action?
Q2. Well, actually, the civil engineer will be an action consent, but it will be to table it. So Q2 is, which we have to do because we have bills. This is a board action to approve the transfer of capital reserve funds to be able to spend pre-referendum dollars. Not to go crazy, not to spend, but there are dollars that are being spent right now for different professionals, rather than taking it from the operating budget, take it from capital reserve, and when the referendum passes, it's refunded.
Oh, I see.
So let me ask you a question. What happens if the referendum doesn't pass?
Then we would have to take it from surplus. Well, yeah, we have, well, we have surplus, we have 2%, or we have a 2% surplus, but, yeah. So that one's an action.
You're saying we already spent, we have to do this, right?
Well, last year we took it from operating expense, which cut into my operating expense. So when the referendum passes, I can refund that to the operating expense. I don't want to take any more out of this, out of the operating
Right.
expense in the
Understood.
current year,
Right.
because we have enough, yeah. So that's why do the transfer now for forward.
Got it.
And it would only be the bridge until the referendum, we get the first amount of money from them.
No matter how long it is in the future, so what if, you know, if it does, for some reason, it will, you know, what if it's 2020 before a referendum passes? Would that still be paid back? Or is there a time limit?
No, no, it'd still be payback. It could still be refunded,
So
absolutely.
this is an, basically, any district undergoing something like a referendum has to put these types of costs in place in order to do what we're doing.
Right,
And we have to pay for it out of somewhere.
right. Yeah,
So it's, there's not, okay.
it's cash management, yeah. And then what would happen is if it didn't pass till 2020, if we used up all of the, I don't even remember what amount I put in there. Okay, so if we spend more than 250, we'll have to do another resolution to expend more than that. So that's, I need a first and a second on that.
Greg, first and second, Bill.
Okay, motion passes. Now, I think other than the adjournment, everything else
consent.
is
Yeah,
consent.
so we need a motion for all consent?
Yes.
Beth, and a
Yes.
second. Greg?
That's everything
Everything
else, yeah. So it was Beth and then Greg. Okay. It appears in blue on my thing. I don't know if it appears in blue in everybody else's.
Okay. I am going to make a speech. I've got 6 minutes left. Yeah. No, before we adjourn, I just want to thank you all for, you didn't deserve, to be here this long. And I think we learned some important things tonight about our communication and what we have to communicate better on, for sure. But thank you for putting up with all the unpleasantness that comes with this job. So I appreciate all your passion, your hard work, and it is worth it. So, thanks again for all that you do. And everyone in the room seconds the motion.
May I have a moment, please?
Of course.
I want to say something.
Microphone.
No. Yeah, I have a few minutes left. I'm going to try to get this. Just want to let you know, I got up earlier and talked to you about the technical difficulties that we were having earlier. Just to let you know that we had a little problem with the computer and it set the Black Magic system off. I had to get Gabe to remote into it to reestablish the streaming. However, I did start the backup recording. The only part of the meeting we missed was the beginning of the public forum, like 1 or 2 speakers. It was very minimal. None of the voting was missed. None of the business was missed. I want to make that, also very clear. Also, for housekeeping notation, I know we only have 2 people left in the audience, but for future meetings, if we have a lot of people who would like to talk to you after the meeting, I respectfully ask the audience and the board if we can move it out to the hallway, because I'm going to be here, not tonight because I have the broom tomorrow morning, but most nights we have to clean this up before we can go home, and we really need to have the room open that we could get the work done. So I respectfully ask that in the future. And that's all I got to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yeah.
And thank you, Raisa, for staying late.
Yeah, you've got school tomorrow. Yeah. Okay, can I have a motion to adjourn, please? Betsy, and second Daphne. All in favor?
All right, let's hope my children are sleeping.
Okay, it's still
Or
today.
they're first to go to school.
Unanimous, yes. Well, I think it wouldn't be wise to set a new date until we have certainty that the state's going to do what they're supposed to.